Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most quietly heroic and completely thankless jobs in modern history, being the woman in charge of a 1950s family's grocery money, armed with a fixed allowance, a handwritten budget, and a booklet of stamps you have to lick. Not with a credit card, not with an app, not with a car full of one-week hauls. No, with a butcher who knows your husband's name, a shopping cart you're faintly embarrassed to push, and a can of Spam that refuses to leave the pantry. Before we drop in, a soft little thank you to everyone who keeps this channel running. If the slow voice and the strange history help you drift off, go ahead and like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments the one meal your grandmother could stretch across 3 entire dinners. Somebody in the comments is about to defend gelatin salad, and honestly, I respect it. Get comfortable. Lights low, blanket up, and maybe set down whatever you're snacking on, unless it is suspended inside lime jello, in which case, carry on. Now, how did a family hand over nearly a third of its income just to eat and call that comfortable? Why grown adults refused to push a shopping cart because it looked embarrassing? What the correct amount of guilt was for buying the wrong brand of gravy? Who decided a toaster you already paid for should count as a free gift? Why the fanciest dish at the party was basically shrimp trapped in dessert? And what exactly you were supposed to do the week coffee doubled and nobody raised the allowance? Congratulations. You just woke up in a brand new kitchen, 1955. There is a folded stack of grocery money in your hand. The butcher is waiting, and the ladies' club arrives Thursday, expecting a molded salad you cannot yet afford. Good luck. You are handed the week's grocery money on Friday evening, folded once, counted out by a husband who has already mentally spent the rest of the paycheck on the mortgage and the car. It is your budget now, your problem now, your entire operating fund for feeding 4 people until next Friday. You are expected to make it stretch across 7 days of breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and the unspoken emergencies. Nobody calls you the household purchasing agent. But that is the job, and the money in your hand is the whole department. The amount is not enormous. $25, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on how the week has gone. Against that, food is the single biggest thing your family spends money on after the roof. A third of everything the household earns is about to pass through your hands and out the other side as milk and meat and bread. Your husband earns the money. You decide, meal by meal, whether it was worth earning. The handover has a ceremony to it. He does not simply leave the money on the counter. He counts it out with the grave ceremony of a man handing over the nation's gold reserves, a reminder that this is a serious sum, that it came from somewhere, and that it is expected to go far. You take it and you fold it into whatever you keep it in. A purse, a tin, an envelope in the drawer with the good scissors. The envelope is now the quiet, unassuming, and essential object in the house that nobody but you thinks about. Roy hands it over with a speech he does not know he is giving. He mentions that the Hendersons managed a roast last Sunday, which is his way of asking for a roast, and he says the word budget with the confidence of a man who has never once stood at a meat counter doing arithmetic in his head. He means well. He also means meat every night, and he means it on this exact amount, and the space between those two facts is where you are about to live for a week. Here is the part nobody says out loud. This is not an allowance in the way the word sounds, like a child's pocket money. This is a working fund, and you are the finance department, the logistics officer, and the field cook all at once. The money has to cover the planned and the unplanned. The gallon of milk you knew about, and the second gallon because the children have decided this is the week they drink like calves. You already know, standing there with the envelope, roughly where every dollar is going. So much to the butcher, so much to the grocer's running tab. A little held back, always, because a budget with no slack is a budget waiting to break the first time coffee goes up. You keep a reserve the way a careful general keeps a reserve, quiet, deliberate, and slightly paranoid, for the week that goes wrong. And a week always, eventually, goes wrong. The money will be gone by Thursday if you are careless and gone by Friday if you are good. And the goal, the only real goal, is that it runs out at exactly the same moment the food does. Too much food and not enough money means an ugly conversation. Too much money and not enough food means you overcooked the caution and the family ate thin for no reason. The art is landing on empty and full at once. So you put the envelope in the drawer, and you feel the specific weight of being trusted with something and blamed for it at the same time. Nobody will thank you if it works. Everybody will notice if it does not. The paycheck is his headline. The envelope is your whole career, run out of a kitchen drawer, one folded stack at a time. Roy has already gone back to the paper. The department is open. You sit at the kitchen table on Thursday night with the newspaper folded open to the grocery advertisements, because the menu for next week does not start with what you want to eat. It starts with what is cheap. The circular tells you the butcher has chuck roast marked down, that eggs are up again, that one chain is running double stamps on Wednesday. You build the whole week backward from those numbers, deciding Tuesday's dinner based on Thursday's advertised price. Everyone else in the house thinks meals appear. You know they are engineered. The advertisements are a battlefield map, and you read them the way an officer reads terrain. A and P has the roast. The store on Delancey has coffee down a nickel. Somewhere in the print there is a limit, 2 per customer, and you note it, because the limit is where the trap is. The cheap thing is bait, and the point of the loss leader is to get you in the door hoping you will forget yourself and buy at full price everywhere else. You will not forget yourself. You have a pencil, so you plan in reverse. Not Monday chicken because you feel like chicken. Monday chicken because chicken is 60 cents a pound this week, and it stretches into a Tuesday soup and a Wednesday sandwich. The meat decides the day. The advertised price decides the meat. Your family's entire week of dinners is silently determined by which animal a stranger decided to discount on a Thursday. You write it out in a column, and the column is a small, quiet, and entirely uncredited marvel of engineering nobody will ever see. 7 dinners, built to interlock, each one leaving behind exactly the bones or the fat or the leftover that starts the next. A roast becomes a hash. A ham becomes a soup. Nothing is a dead end. Every meal is also a raw material for a later meal. And you hold the 7-day machine in your head at once. Mrs. Ferraro, 2 doors down, does it differently, and you have opinions about her method. She plans forward, cooks what she likes, and lets the bill land where it lands, and then acts surprised on Friday, as though the grocery bill were weather and not arithmetic. You have watched her come home with 3 bags of things that do not add up to a single complete dinner. Beautiful things, expensive things, a jar of imported olives and no bread to put anything near. She shops like she is decorating. You shop like you are surviving, and the fence between your yards is also the border between 2 economic philosophies. The circular also lies a little, and reading it means reading the lie. The giant photograph of the roast is not the roast you will get for that price. The word fresh is doing heavy work. The starburst that shouts special sometimes marks a thing that was never expensive to begin with. You have learned to translate the page, to see the actual grocery underneath the excited typography, and this translation is a skill nobody taught you and nobody pays you for. By the time the coffee is cold, you have a plan, and the plan is not a wish list. It is a route. It tells you which stores to hit and in what order, what to buy at each, where the stamps are doubled, what to skip no matter how good it looks, because it does not serve the weak. You fold the paper and set the list on top of it, and the list is a contract you have written with yourself. Roy walks through, sees you at the table with the paper, and assumes you are reading the news. You are, in a way. You are reading the only news that will actually change your Tuesday. He does not ask what is for dinner next week because he assumes the answer is simply dinner, arriving on schedule the way it always does. You turn off the kitchen light. The week is already cooked. It just does not know it yet. You have to decide, every single week, how often you are going to do this. The refrigerator in the corner is reliable but small, with a freezer box barely large enough for ice trays and a brick of ice cream. It cannot hold a week of fresh meat and produce without something turning. So you shop 2 or 3 times, hauling a little each trip, or you gamble on one big haul and race the spoilage. The size of your icebox decides the shape of your week. You did not choose it, but you live by it. The refrigerator is proud, rounded and white, and it hums in the corner like a appliance that thinks it is doing more than it is. It keeps things cold. It does not keep things cold for very long, and it certainly does not keep a family's whole week of meat. The freezer compartment is a joke told in frost, roughly the size of a shoebox, a little frosted cave that by February has iced itself shut around a forgotten package you will find in spring. You cannot plan around a freezer that small. You can only apologize to it. So the produce comes home in daily doses, because a head of lettuce bought Monday for Friday is a head of lettuce that will be compost by Thursday. Meat has to be cooked within a day or two of buying, which means meat has to be bought within a day or two of eating, which means you are back at the counter constantly, a regular, a fixture, a woman the butcher greets by name because he sees you more than some of his relatives. This is the great hidden difference between your kitchen and the ones that come later. You do not stockpile the fresh. You cannot. You buy small and often, and the shopping is not a weekly event but a daily rhythm, woven into the walk to school and the errand to the post office and the general business of being the person who keeps everyone fed. The trip to the store is not a chore you dread. It is simply the shape of the day, repeated. Mrs. Dolan across the street got one of the big new refrigerators, the kind with a real freezer, and she has not stopped mentioning it. She now shops once a week, she says. Once. As though she has personally invented time. You smile and congratulate her, and calculate what that machine cost against how many roasts it would take to justify it. The math does not close for you yet, so you keep walking to the store, 3 times a week, in all weather, while Mrs. Dolan waves from her porch liberated. The daily shop has its own quiet advantages, and you would not admit them to Mrs. Dolan for anything. You catch the fresh bread the day it is baked. You get the meat marked down at the end of Saturday because you happen to be there. You see the specials the moment they appear instead of a week late. Being at the store constantly means being at the store when the good things happen, and the good things happen without warning. It also means the food never truly stops being your responsibility, not for a single day. There is no big Sunday haul that buys you a week of not thinking about it. You think about it every morning, because every morning the icebox is nearly empty again and the day's meals have to be gone and gotten. The smallness of one appliance has reached out and organized your entire life around the next few hours of food. You wipe down the refrigerator's shelf, close its heavy chrome latch door, and hear it settle back into its self-important hum. It has held the milk and the butter and tonight's meat and nothing more, because nothing more is what it can do. Tomorrow you will fill it again, a little, and the day after, and the day after that. The icebox is small. So the week is short, and there are a great many of them. You have to physically move the groceries from the store to the kitchen, and how you do that depends entirely on what you have. Maybe there is a car and a husband who took it to work, leaving you to walk. Maybe there is a wheeled trolley or a string bag and a bus. Maybe you carry everything by hand, which means you cannot buy more than your arms will hold, which quietly shrinks the whole week's menu. The distance between the store and your stove is a real budget line. It just does not appear on any receipt. The car, if there is a car, left at 7 with your husband inside it. This is the arrangement in most of the houses on the street. One car, one driver, one job it drives to, and the woman who has to feed everyone gets the sidewalk. So the family owns a machine that could carry a week of groceries in one trip, and it spends the day parked outside an office 11 miles from the nearest can of soup. What you have instead is a wheeled cart, a folding tartan trolley that squeaks on one wheel and tips if you load it wrong. It is graceless, heavy, and openly resentful. It is also the difference between 4 bags and 2, and 4 bags is a real dinner while 2 bags is a compromise. You pull it behind you like a stubborn metal dog, and it holds exactly as much as your back and its squeaking wheel agree to allow. The string bag is the thin, cheap and reliable backup, folded flat in your coat pocket for the days you told yourself you were only getting one thing. You are never only getting one thing. The string bag stretches obscenely, holding twice what it looks like it should. The oranges and the bread pressing through the netting until the thing resembles a fisherman's catch. It cuts red lines into your fingers by the 3rd block. You switch hands. You keep walking. Mr. Petrucci at the corner store understands this arithmetic better than your own husband does, and he plays it kindly. He will hold a heavy bag behind the counter if you say you are coming back with the trolley. He sends the delivery boy, Sal, on the bicycle with the big front basket when the order is genuinely too much for a woman on foot, and Sal wobbles down the street standing on the pedals with your potatoes riding shotgun. It costs a little to send Sal. Sometimes the little is worth it. The weather is not on your side and never asks to be. In July, the butter is soft before you reach the porch and the milk is nervous. In January, the walk home is a slow negotiation with ice that has no interest in negotiating, the bag swinging, your gloves useless for gripping string. Rain turns paper sacks into wet lace that surrenders its whole contents onto the sidewalk 2 doors from safety. You have watched a week's eggs meet the pavement. You do not talk about it. You simply go back. And here is the quiet truth of it. What you can carry is what you can cook. A woman with a car buys the big sack of potatoes and the case of cans and the roast that feeds Sunday and Monday both. A woman on foot buys the medium potatoes because the big sack is a punishment to carry, and the smaller purchase becomes the smaller meal, and the distance to the kitchen has silently edited the family's dinner without anyone deciding to. You reach your own door at last, arms trembling, fingers striped, the trolley squeaking its final complaint. You lift everything onto the counter in one aching motion and stand there a moment, breathing, having personally transported the entire week's survival across half a neighbourhood on foot. Nobody times this leg of the journey. Nobody counts it. It is the invisible mileage under every meal. You put the milk away first. It has had a hard walk too. You are supposed to push the new contraption up and down the aisles, this wheeled metal frame with 2 wire baskets the store keeps insisting you use. You have spent years graduating out of pushing a baby carriage, and now a man named Sylvan Goldman wants you back behind a set of wheels. It feels ridiculous. Half the shoppers are ignoring the things entirely, carrying handbaskets until their arms give out. You take the cart or you take the shame, and the store has arranged matters so that either way you end up buying more. The cart is Goldman's idea, and Goldman is a store owner out in Oklahoma who noticed something unforgivable about human beings. People stop shopping the instant the basket gets heavy. Not when they run out of money, not when they run out of list, when their arm gives out. So he built a machine to remove the arm from the equation entirely, and in doing so he built a machine to remove the limit from your spending, and the two turn out to be the same machine. At first nobody wanted it, and you understand exactly why. The men refused because pushing a cart looked weak, unmanly, a thing beneath a fellow who could clearly carry his own bag of flour. Thank you. The women refused because it looked like a pram, and a great many women had spent the last decade fighting their way out from behind a pram and were not eager to volunteer back into one. The cart sat there, folded and rejected, an invention ahead of everyone's pride. So Goldman cheated. He hired people, actual paid actors of every age, to walk his aisles pushing the carts and pretending to shop, so that any real customer walking in saw a store full of dignified adults using the things without embarrassment. He stationed a greeter at the door to press a cart into your hands and explain warmly that everyone was doing it. Peer pressure, manufactured on purpose, wheeled and chrome. And it worked, because it always works. Mr. Alderman, who greets at the A&P, does the modern, gentle version of this. He rolls a cart toward you before you have fully cleared the door, smiling, saying good morning, so that refusing it would take an act of will you do not have at 9 a.m. You take the cart. Of course you take the cart. The whole store is arranged around you taking the cart, and Mr. Alderman is simply the last friendly nudge in a plan that started in Oklahoma. And then the terrible genius of the thing reveals itself. The cart is big. It looks empty. A basket that holds what your 2 arms hold feels full at a reasonable amount, but a cart that holds 4 times that looks tragically bare with a reasonable amount in it. So you add, just to make it look less sad, a second thing you did not plan, a treat you were not going to buy, a bigger sack because it fits now, and the fitting is the trap. The cart has opinions about how empty it should look, and its opinion is never. You push it down the aisle and feel the pull of it, the way it wants to be filled, the way the smooth, silent, and softly conspiratorial wheels make adding one more thing cost nothing at the moment, and everything at the register. This is not an accident. A man studied you, studied all of us, and concluded that we will buy exactly as much as we can comfortably move, and then he removed the discomfort. The cart is kindness and manipulation welded to the same frame. You reach the end of the aisle with more in the basket than the list allowed, and you know it, and you leave it there anyway, because taking things back out of a cart feels somehow worse than never adding them. Goldman knew that too. Goldman knew all of it. The wheels turn. The basket fills. You have been outmaneuvered by a folding chair with ambitions, and you are not the first. You step up to the meat case and wait your turn, because meat is not something you simply lift off a shelf yet. It comes from a man in a straw boater and a striped apron standing behind a refrigerated glass counter, and you have to ask him for it out loud. You name the cut, the weight, the trim, and the price you are hoping for, and the two of you conduct a small negotiation in front of everyone waiting behind you. He knows your family. He knows your budget. You order accordingly. Mr. Dworak runs the counter, and Mr. Dworak is a diplomat with a cleaver. He stands behind the glass on a floor sprinkled with sawdust, the sawdust there to catch the drips, the smell of it faintly of pine, blood, and cold. He wears the straw boater in every season. He has forearms like the roasts he sells and a memory for families that borders on unsettling. And he greets you by your husband's name because in his ledger of the neighborhood, that is how you are filed. The transaction is a performance with an audience, and the audience is the line behind you. You ask what the Chuck is doing today, which is code, and he tells you a number, which is also code. And somewhere underneath the pleasantries, the two of you are establishing what you will actually pay. You cannot see the price until he weighs it, which means you are ordering slightly blind, trusting a man with a scale you cannot read from your side of the glass. This is where the skill lives. You do not ask for the good cut. You ask what is good today, and let him steer you toward the thing he needs to move, the thing that is fresh and plentiful and therefore kind to your budget. You ask him to trim it a certain way, to leave the bone in because the bone is soup, to grind the tough end because ground is dinner. He does it without comment, his knife moving with the bored precision of a man who has broken down more animals than you have had hot dinners. Mr. Dworak also does the mercies that never appear on any receipt. He tucks an extra soup bone into the package for free, because he likes you, and because a soup bone costs him nothing and buys your loyalty for a decade. He warns you off the thing that looks cheap but will cook down to nothing. He tells you quietly, leaning in, that the good beef is coming Thursday, so wait. So you wait. He is a butcher, but he is also functionally your financial advisor, and he works for tips of goodwill. The glass between you matters. You cannot touch the meat, cannot poke it or turn it over or pretend you know more than you do. You have to describe what you want to a man who then produces it, which means the whole thing runs on language and trust and the accumulated history of 100 previous Saturdays. A stranger would get honest weight and no soup bone. You get the soup bone. The soup bone is the interest on years of showing up. Behind you the line shifts and someone clears a throat, and you feel the pressure of the audience, the sense that dithering over ground beef is a public failure. So you decide faster than you would like, commit to the roast, watch him wrap it in white paper that crackles as he folds it and ties it with a length of string pulled from a spool bolted to the counter. The package is warm from his hands and cold from the meat, a paradox you carry away. He writes the price on the paper in grease pencil, hands it across, and calls the next name before you have fully turned. You are dismissed kindly, a satisfied customer holding tomorrow's dinner and a free bone, having negotiated a deal that felt like a chat. The sawdust muffles your footsteps. Mr. Dworak is already someone else's advisor now. You do not buy the expensive cuts, because the expensive cuts are for people whose budgets you do not have. You buy the chuck, the shank, the neck bones, the organ meats, the tough and the gristled and the strange. And then you spend hours convincing them to become dinner. A cheap roast becomes 3 meals if you plan it right. Bones become soup. Nothing arrives at your table already tender. You are the reason it gets there at all, standing over a low pot for an afternoon, coaxing flavour out of the parts nobody else wanted. The cheap cuts are cheap for a reason, and the reason is that they are difficult. The tender cuts, the ones that cook themselves in 10 minutes, cost what they cost because anyone can ruin them and few do. The chuck and the shank cost less because they demand time, and time is the one ingredient you have in abundance and the store cannot charge you for, so you buy difficulty at a discount and pay for it in afternoons. Heat and patience are your whole technique. A tough roast turns tender only if you defeat it slowly, hours at a low temperature, a covered pot barely trembling on the back burner, while the connective tissue surrenders like a besieged city running low on options. You cannot rush it. Rushing it produces a thing like a shoe, so you start early, you keep the heat low and honest, and you let the afternoon do the work your allowance could not afford to buy pre-done. The organ meats are the frontier, and you have made peace with the frontier. Liver, cheap, nutritious, and hated by children on principle, comes to the table disguised in onions and apology. Tongue, kidney, heart, all of it edible, all of it a fraction of the price of the cuts with pretty names, all of it requiring a cook who is not squeamish, and a family that has learned not to ask too many questions before the first bite. You do not announce what it is, you announce that it is dinner. Grandma Vasco, your mother-in-law, is the professor of this, and her visits are equal parts help and inspection. She arrives, ties on an apron without being asked, and shows you the trick of the shank you thought you already knew, cracking the bone so the marrow enriches the pot. She does it with her sleeves shoved up and an expression of mild disappointment that you had not done it already. You resent it. You also write it down. The economics are ruthless and beautiful. 1 cheap roast, bought right and cooked slow, becomes Sunday dinner as a roast, Monday supper as a hash, and Tuesday lunch as a sandwich. And then the bone it rode in on becomes Wednesday soup. 4 meals from one purchase. The expensive cut would have been one glorious dinner and then a memory. Yours is a small perpetual machine, feeding the family down the week from a single act of shopping. Nothing is a dead end, and this is the discipline. The fat gets rendered and saved for frying. The scraps too small to serve get folded into the next thing. The cooking water from the vegetables becomes the base of the soup. You run the kitchen like a country under blockade, where every resource has 3 uses planned before it arrives, and waste is not a sin so much as a mathematical error, a dropped stitch in a week that cannot afford one. So you stand over the low pot in the afternoon light, lifting the lid, breathing the steam, testing the meat with a fork it is finally starting to yield to. It has taken you 4 hours to make something a wealthier woman would have bought ready in 4 minutes. But she spent 4 times the money, and you spent time you had, and the family will eat off this pot for days. The fork slides in clean at last. The frontier has been civilized. Dinner is tender, and it was almost free. You do not buy milk so much as manage a standing arrangement with the man who leaves it on your doorstep before dawn. The glass bottles clink in their wire carrier in the cold, the cream risen in a plug at the neck, and the account runs on trust and a little paper ticket. You adjust the standing order by the week, more bottles when the children are drinking hard, fewer when money is tight. It is one more small ledger you keep in your head, one more line in the food budget that arrives whether you are ready or not. Earl is the milkman, and Earl operates in a world before the rest of the street has opened its eyes. He comes in the blue dark, his truck idling low, and sets the bottles on the porch with a practiced quiet that mostly fails because glass on concrete has an opinion, and the opinion is a clink. You have learned to hear it in your sleep, the percussion of the day beginning, milk arriving before the sun has committed to the idea. The bottles themselves are little marvels you take entirely for granted. Glass, returnable and reusable, the cream floated up into a thick plug at the neck that you spoon off for coffee or shake back in depending on your mood and your intentions for the day. In summer, the milk on the porch is racing the heat and you have to be quick. In winter, it sometimes freezes and pushes its own frozen column up out of the bottle, lifting the little cap on a pillar of ice like a magic trick nobody asked for. The genius and the danger of the arrangement is that you never actually decide to buy milk. You decided once, in general, and now it simply comes, a standing order that renews itself in the dark without your daily consent. This is wonderful when you are busy and treacherous when you are broke, because the milk does not know the envelope is tight this week. It arrives with the serene confidence of a thing that was ordered, and it goes onto the tab, which has the patience of a creditor and the memory to match. So you manage it in whispers, catching Earl on the porch to say only 2 bottles Thursday, or leaving a folded note tucked into an empty for him to find. You are conducting a slow correspondence with a man you mostly see as a silhouette, negotiating your family's dairy supply through paper tickets and porch notes. He adjusts without comment, marks it in his book, tips his cap at the window if he sees you watching, and rolls on to the next house and the next standing order. Earl also carries the neighbourhood's secrets, because a man who visits every porch before dawn learns things. He knows which houses have stopped their order, which is never good news. He knows the Kowalskis added a bottle, which means either a visitor or a baby, and the street will know which soon enough. He is discreet, mostly, but he is a node in the same information network the women run over the fences, just earlier and colder and driving a truck. Settling the milk tab is its own monthly reckoning, separate from the grocer, separate from the butcher, a third ledger arriving with its own rhythm. You pay Earl in cash on the porch, or leave it in the empty bottle, and the arithmetic of it lives permanently in the back of your mind. A low hum of obligation, so many bottles times so many days, steadily compounding while you sleep. And yet you would not give it up, not really, because the milk on the doorstep is one of the few groceries that comes to you instead of you going to it. In a life measured in trips to the store, the milkman is the one merchant who does the walking. You open the door to the cold, gather the clinking bottles into your arms, and feel the cream cold through the glass. Earl is already 3 houses down, delivering tomorrow to somebody else. You run a tab at the grocer, and that tab is a physical book he keeps behind the counter in his own handwriting. You take what you need through the week and he writes it down, and the whole thing gets settled on payday when the paycheck comes in. This means you are borrowing groceries against money you do not have yet, every single week, and staying honest with a total you cannot fully see. You carry a rough running figure in your head. The grocer carries the real one. On Friday, the two numbers have to meet. Mr. Petrucci keeps the book, and the book is a marbled ledger with your family's name at the top of a page, filled in his cramped forward-leaning hand. Every loaf, every can, every quarter-pound of coffee goes down in a column. The numbers stacking through the week toward a Friday total neither of you says out loud until it is time. It is a credit card made of paper, trust, and habit, running on nothing but the fact that he believes you will pay. And that belief is the system. The book has no interest clause, no contract, no signature, nothing but Mr. Petrucci's private conviction that your family is good for it. That conviction is the most valuable thing you own and the easiest to lose, a small pilot light you feed every Friday and could snuff with one bad month. A tab paid on time for years is a kind of wealth the bank never sees. You keep your own count, roughly, because a woman who does not know her own tab is a woman about to be surprised, and surprise is a luxury the allowance cannot afford. So you tally in your head as you go, a can here, a dozen there, holding a running estimate that you compare against his book on Friday with quiet tension. Usually you are close. When you are not, it is worth finding out why, gently, because grocers are human and pencils slip. The danger of the book is the same as the danger of the milk, which is the same as the danger of the cart. It makes spending frictionless. Handing over cash hurts a little, and the little hurt is useful, a natural break. Saying, put it on the book hurts not at all in the moment, which means the moment is happy to keep saying it, and the total quietly grows all week in a place you are not looking. By Friday, the book has a number, and the number remembers every Tuesday that felt affordable. Mr. Petrucci manages this with the tact of a man who has watched families rise and fall from behind his counter. When a tab climbs high and payday is still far, he does not scold. He makes a gentle comment, mentions the total in passing as if simply keeping you informed, and lets you draw your own conclusions and cut your own coat. It is the kindest possible way to say slow down, and you hear it, and you slow down, and your dignity survives intact. On Friday, you come in with the folded money from the envelope and you settle the book, and the settling is a ceremony of adulthood. He turns the ledger to your page. You look at the total together, you count out the cash, and he draws a line through the week and writes paid. And the page is clean again, ready to begin filling from zero on Saturday. The line through the numbers is deeply satisfying. A week survived, an account squared, and then it starts over, the empty column at the top of the page, the trusting machine reset, the new week waiting to be written down one can at a time. You are, in the most literal sense, always slightly in debt to the man who feeds you and always, by Friday, out of it again. Mr. Petrucci caps his pen and turns to the next customer. Your page is clean, for about a day. You have a fixed amount and a fixed pride about not going over it, and those two facts govern your entire week at the store. Coming in under the allowance is a private victory nobody throws you a party for. Going over it means a conversation you do not want to have, or quietly covering the gap yourself, or serving beans on a night you had planned meat. The number is not a suggestion. It is the edge of the world, and you spend 7 days walking carefully along it with a basket in your hand. The number lives in your head with the permanence of a birthday. You do not need to write it down. It is simply there, a ceiling you feel yourself approaching the way you feel a low doorway, ducking instinctively before you hit it. Every item you consider gets weighed against it, silently, automatically, so that shopping is less a series of choices than one long continuous act of arithmetic conducted while smiling at the neighbours. The pride is the strange part, the part that later generations will not quite understand. Nobody is standing over you enforcing this. Your husband handed you the money and mostly stopped thinking about it. The store does not know your budget. The pressure to stay under the number comes almost entirely from inside you, a private standard, a sense that staying within the allowance is simply what a capable woman does, and going over is a personal failure to be avoided like a stain on a good blouse. Coming in under is a triumph you celebrate alone. You get to the end of the week with $1 and change still folded in the envelope, and there is no parade, no ribbon, no acknowledgement, just a quiet, warm feeling of a job done well and a decision about what the leftover dollar becomes. Sometimes it is a treat. Sometimes it is a reserve for next week. Sometimes it is a secret, tucked away. The beginning of a fund that is yours in a way that almost nothing else is. Going over is the thing you steer around all week like a pothole, because going over has consequences that are never dramatic and always uncomfortable. It might mean the conversation, the one where you explain that beef went up, and he nods but you feel judged anyway. It might mean making up the difference from that secret fund, spending your own careful savings to preserve the appearance that the allowance was enough. Or it means the beans. There are always the beans. Mrs. Ostrowski next door famously does not stay under, and famously does not care, and you find her both maddening and a little enviable. She overspends with a shrug and lets her husband grumble and considers the entire business of a fixed number to be beneath her attention. You could not live that way. The number is load-bearing for you, a structure that holds the week up, and a woman who ignores it is a woman you cannot quite trust with a soup pot, no matter how nice her curtains. The truly hard weeks are the ones where the number and the family's needs simply do not fit, where the growing boys are eating like the growing boys they are, and the price of everything has crept up a nickel at a time, and the ceiling has not risen to match. On those weeks you perform small, quiet miracles, stretching, substituting, and disguising, so that the family eats the same and the number holds and nobody at the table ever suspects how close the thing came to the edge, because that is the deepest part of the pride. Not just staying under the number, but staying under it invisibly, so that the effort never shows, so that the family experiences abundance and only you know how narrow the margin was. You want them full and unaware. You want the seams to hold and never to show. That is the job done well. The weekends, the number held, nobody noticed. You counted a victory anyway. You calculate constantly, in your head, because nothing in this store tells you the price per ounce, and no machine does the arithmetic for you. You weigh 2 brands of the same thing in your hands and figure out which is actually cheaper once the different can sizes are accounted for. You catch the deal that is not really a deal. You divide the roast into the number of dinners it will make and decide whether the price per meal is one you can afford. All day, quietly, you are running numbers nobody sees you run. Today it is peas. 2 cans sit side by side pretending to be equals, one a penny cheaper and silently 2 ounces smaller, a small mathematical mugging conducted in broad daylight. The store printed the weight at one end of the label and the price at the other on purpose, betting you will not bother to divide. You divide. The larger box that shouts economy size is sometimes, quietly, more expensive per ounce than the one, betting that the word economy will switch your brain off before your arithmetic switches on. It does not switch off. You divide anyway, so you stand in the aisle with a can in each hand, weighing them like a merchant of old, reading the small faded and stamped ounces, doing the long division against the marked price at a speed that would embarrass a schoolteacher. 14 ounces for 19 cents or 18 for a quarter. You solve it in the time it takes to reach for the better one. Nobody taught you this. The budget taught you this. Necessity is a patient and relentless tutor. The fake deal is the enemy you hunt all day. The special that is only special compared to a price nobody ever actually paid. The 2 for 1 on a thing you would never buy one of. The bulk bin that saves a nickel and demands you buy a month of something that will go stale in a week. You have learned to see through the excited signage to the actual value underneath, and the skill has made you slightly cynical about exclamation points in general, in the store and possibly in life. The meat gets a different calculation, the one that matters most, the price per meal instead of the price per pound. A cheap cut at 40 cents a pound that feeds the family 4 times is cheaper per dinner than a tender cut at 90 cents that feeds them once. You are not shopping for pounds, you are shopping for dinners. And the number that governs everything is the one the price tag does not show, the cost of getting one family fed one time, which only exists in your head. Miss Chalmers, the young newlywed 2 blocks over, has not learned any of this yet, and you watch her shop with the pained sympathy of a veteran watching a recruit. She buys the economy size of things her household cannot finish. She takes the fake deals at face value, delighted. She shops for pounds and pretty labels, not for dinners, and her little grocery bill runs higher than yours despite feeding fewer people. She will learn. The budget will teach her the same way it taught you, without mercy and without a syllabus. All of this happens invisibly, which is the part that stings a little. Your husband sees the same amount of food arrive every week and assumes it simply costs what it costs. He does not see the 100 small divisions, the cans weighed in the hand, the fake deals dodged, the price per meal computed on the fly, and you are good at it, genuinely good. The savings you find are real, cumulative, the difference over a year between an allowance that holds and one that does not. You find them silently, one aisle at a time, carrying the calculation in a head that everyone assumes is thinking about curtains. You set the better can in the cart. 19 cents saved, nobody will ever know. You know. You clip, you save, you track which store gives what on which day, because the discounts are scattered across the week like a scavenger hunt and only a paying attention wins them. One chain doubles the trading stamps on Wednesday. Another runs a coupon in the Thursday paper. A third marks down bread on Saturday afternoon. You cannot be everywhere, so you choose, planning your trips around the deals the way a general plans around supply lines. The savings are real, but they are small, and collecting them is its own unpaid part-time job. The coupons come from everywhere, and you have trained yourself to catch them all. They hide in the newspaper, in the magazine, printed on the side of the box you already bought, tucked into the mailbox by companies who want you hooked. You cut them out with the good scissors and keep them in a little accordion folder or an envelope in your purse, sorted by a system only you understand, and you feel a clean satisfaction every time one of them shaves 5 cents off a thing you were buying anyway. The stamps are the bigger game, and the stamps keep a schedule you plan your week around, like a farmer watching the sky. The store gives you S&H Green Stamps with every purchase, 1 per dime spent, and on certain days it gives you double. And the double days are when a clever woman does her real shopping. So you hold the big trip for Wednesday, when the stamps come thick, and you build your booklet twice as fast for buying the exact same groceries you were going to buy anyway. The trick is not spending more. The trick is timing. This turns your week into a logistics operation that would impress a shipping clerk. Bread is cheapest Saturday afternoon when it is a day from stale, so bread is a Saturday errand. Stamps double Wednesday, so the big shop is Wednesday. The coupon expires Friday, so the coupon item is a Thursday grab. You are running 3 or 4 different stores on 3 or 4 different days, threading your errands through the neighborhood to catch each deal at the exact hour it blooms. And it is genuinely tiring in a way that never gets counted as work. The savings on any single item are small, a nickel here, a doubled stamp there, and to gather enough of them to matter you have to spend hours, miles, and attention that nobody bills you for and nobody thanks you for. A man who saved his company this kind of money all week would get a title. You get a slightly heavier stamp booklet and the private knowledge that you shaved $1 off the week through sheer diligence. Mr. Ferris, who manages the market on 3rd, has learned to spot the serious hunters and treats you with a wary professional respect. He knows you come Wednesday for the double stamps and Saturday for the marked-down bread, and he knows you are not fooled by the displays at the end of the aisle, and he has stopped trying to upsell you anything because you have visibly done the math already. He simply nods, presses the stamps into your hand off the roll, and lets you conduct your quiet raid on his margins in peace. The folder of coupons has its own dramas. The one that expired yesterday, discovered too late, a genuine little grief. The rare, glorious alignment where a coupon lands on a sale item on a double stamp day, and a single can of beans becomes a monument to your competence, saving money in 3 directions at once. You live for that alignment. It happens perhaps twice a year. All of it, the clipping and the timing and the routing, adds up to something real by the end of the year. A genuine sum kept in the family's pocket by a woman treating grocery shopping as the competitive sport it secretly is. Nobody sees the sport. They see the food, you catch the double stamp day, the booklet fattens. You are winning a game only you are playing. You come home from the store with a little strip of stamps and an evening chore, because the reward for shopping has to be assembled by hand. You sit at the kitchen table with a booklet and a tongue that already knows the taste of the dried glue, and you paste the perforated stamps in 50 points to a page, 24 pages to a book. The children sometimes help, badly. It is soothing and slightly absurd, this saving up, and you do it week after week toward a toaster you can already picture in the catalogue. The stamps come off the roll at the store in a little perforated ribbon, green and official-looking, printed with the S and the H of Sperry and Hutchinson, a company that prints, it likes to boast, more stamps every year than the United States Post Office. You believe it. The whole country is licking these things. 2 out of every 3 households in America are sitting at kitchen tables exactly like yours, tongues out, pasting green squares into little books toward a lamp or a toaster or a set of luggage they have circled in a catalogue. The taste is unmistakable and slightly grim, a dry mineral sweetness that coats the tongue and stays there. You could use a damp sponge. Everyone means to use a damp sponge. Nobody uses the damp sponge because the tongue is always right there and the sponge is always across the kitchen, and so a whole nation flavors its evenings with the faint residue of thrift. You have licked approximately 3,000 of them this year, and your tongue knows their taste better than some foods. This is not something you mention to company. The pages have their arithmetic, 50 points to fill one, and the points come in 1s and 10s and 50s, so filling a page is a puzzle of denominations. A single fat 50-pointer clears a page in one satisfying slap. A drift of little ones takes forever, a mosaic of green assembled square by square. You develop preferences, opinions, a whole aesthetic about how a page should be filled, and you feel a completely disproportionate satisfaction when a booklet closes flat, full, and neat with no wasted space. The children help, and the help is a mixed blessing you accept for the company. Little Donald licks with tremendous enthusiasm and no accuracy, planting stamps at angles that offend you, doubling them up, sticking one to his own forehead for an afternoon. You let him, because the pasting is a rare, quiet, shared task. The two of you at the table in the lamplight, and a slightly crooked booklet, is a price for a child who wanted to sit beside you and be useful. The whole ritual is soothing in a way that is hard to defend to anyone who did not grow up doing it. There is something genuinely calming about the repetition, the lick, the press, the smoothing of the stamp flat with a thumb, the slow, measurable progress toward a goal you can hold in your mind. After a hard day of arithmetic and hauling and stretching cheap meat, the pasting asks nothing of you but your tongue and your patience, and gives back the clean feeling of a thing being completed. And underneath the calm sits the quiet absurdity you try not to look at too directly. You are being paid for shopping in a currency you have to manufacture yourself at your own table, on your own evening, with your own saliva. The store gets your money and your loyalty. You get homework. And yet the toaster at the end of it feels earned in a way a bought toaster never would, assembled one lick at a time from the residue of 100 ordinary errands. So you smooth down the last stamp of the evening, close the booklet, and set it in the drawer with the others, the growing pile of your patience made physical. One more page toward the toaster, one more evening flavoured with glue. Donald has fallen asleep with a stamp on his cheek. You leave it. You finally fill a booklet, all 1,200 points of it, and now you get to trade it for something, which feels like getting a gift for free. It is not free. You paid for every stamp in the price of the groceries the whole time, a tiny surcharge hidden inside the milk and the bread and the coffee. But standing at the redemption counter with your full book, choosing a toaster or a lamp or a set of luggage from the catalogue, you get to feel like the store owes you. So you take the toaster and say thank you. The catalogue is the real product, and you have studied it the way a scholar studies a sacred text. It arrives thick and glossy, page after page of toasters, mixers and card tables, of wristwatches and camping tents, each one priced not in dollars but in books, so many filled booklets for each item. You have circled things. You have negotiated with yourself over things. You have lain awake deciding between the mixer, which is practical, and the mantel clock, which is not, and feeling the pull of the clock precisely because it is not. The redemption store is a strange and wonderful place, a shop where nothing has a price you can pay with money. You walk in with your booklets, not your purse, and everything on the shelves belongs to the world of licked green squares, a parallel economy running on tongue and patience. Behind the counter, Miss Ludicky checks your books, counts your pages, confirms you have saved enough, and hands over the toaster like a teller paying out a savings account you funded one errand at a time. And here is the beautiful lie at the centre of it all, the lie you happily believe: the toaster feels free. It feels like a reward, a bonus, a gift the universe handed you for the simple act of buying groceries you had to buy anyway. It is, of course, nothing of the kind. The cost of every stamp was baked into the price of the food, a fraction of a cent on every item, collected over months, handed back to you as a toaster and a warm feeling. You paid in full, one lick at a time, so slowly the money tiptoed out of your purse without ever waking you. But try telling yourself that at the counter. Try holding the toaster and feeling cheated. You cannot. The slow accumulation has done something the honest transaction never could. It has separated the paying from the getting so completely that the getting feels like pure gift. A woman who would agonize over spending $5 on a toaster will happily fill 20 weeks of booklets worth far more and feel she got it for nothing. The stamp knew that about you. The stamp was designed around exactly that. Roy does not fully understand the toaster, and you do not fully explain it. To him it simply appeared. A new appliance on the counter, and when he asks where it came from, you say the stamps. and he nods as though that is an answer, which for your purposes it is. Explaining that the toaster cost more than a toaster, paid invisibly across half a year of groceries, would spoil something, and besides, the toaster works, and the toast is good, and some illusions are worth their small hidden price. The children treat the redeemed objects with a reverence real purchases never earn. The stamp toaster, the stamp lamp, the stamp card table are family artifacts, and everyone knows the story of each one, how many books it took, how long you saved. A bought toaster is just a toaster. A stamp toaster is a saga with a heating element, so you carry your toaster home, absurdly pleased, having spent months of saliva and a hidden fortune in grocery surcharges to obtain an appliance you technically could have simply bought. You would not trade the feeling for anything. The slow way made it precious. You set it on the counter and admire it. It cost you nothing, you tell yourself, and you almost believe it. You stand in front of the coffee and make a choice that says more about the budget than you would like it to. There is the national brand, priced high and holding steady on the shelf. There is the store's own 8 o'clock, ground fresh in the red machine at the front for less money. And there is the jar of instant, faster and cheaper and slightly ashamed of itself. Coffee is the one thing your husband notices immediately if you cut corners, so this is not a small decision. It is a daily negotiation with a man who has not woken up yet. Coffee is also the most temperamental line in the allowance, the item that jumps when you least expect it. It answers to frosts in countries you could not find on a map, to shipping and weather and things entirely outside your kitchen, and its price can swing from under 40 cents a pound one year to nearly $1 the next. Nothing else in the basket behaves this way. A loaf of bread is a loaf of bread. Coffee is a small commodity market you are forced to trade in every week, whether you understand it or not. The 8 o'clock is the sensible answer, and A&P has built half its empire on your sensible answers. It is the store's own beans, ground fresh for you in the red machine at the front, filling that whole corner of the store with a warm, oily, and inviting fragrance that is honestly better than most of the coffee tastes. You bring the bag to the machine, a clerk pours the beans in, and it grinds with a growl and a smell that makes the sensible choice feel almost luxurious. It costs less than the name brand. It is, by any honest measure, fine. But your husband has a tongue for exactly this and no other grocery item. He will eat the cheap cut, the stretched casserole, the disguised liver without a word, but he knows his coffee, or believes he does, and a switch to the store brand earns a frown over the morning paper and a comment about the coffee tasting off. So the coffee gets protected, promoted above its station, guarded in the budget while cheaper corners are cut everywhere he cannot see, because the coffee is the one corner he can. The instant is the frontier you approach only in desperation. It sits there in its jar, brown crystals promising speed and thrift, a spoonful and some hot water, and done. It is cheaper and faster. It tastes, to a man who knows his coffee, like a rumour of coffee, and serving it to Roy on a normal morning would start a small cold war. You keep a jar anyway hidden for the mornings you have run out and pride matters less than caffeine. Wendell, the young clerk who runs the grinding machine, has watched this drama play out across 1,000 households and offers his counsel freely. He tells you which beans came in fresh, steers you toward the ones that will keep your husband quiet, grinds it to the coarseness your percolator prefers, with the grave attention of a pharmacist filling a prescription. He knows the coffee is not really about the coffee. It is about a marriage running smoothly on a working woman's careful choices. Wendell grinds accordingly. The percolator at home completes the ritual gurgling on the stove, filling the kitchen with the smell that is the actual first event of everyone's day. That smell has to be right. It is the thing your husband wakes into, and a good pot smooths a morning the way nothing else does, while a bad one sours it before anyone has spoken. So you protect the coffee. It is cheap insurance on the mood of the house. So you choose the 8 o'clock most weeks, the sensible, fragrant compromise, and save the name brand for when you can and hide the instant for when you must. 3 coffees, 3 budgets, 1 particular man to keep contented. The red machine growls. Hours from now, the kitchen will smell like a good decision. You decide, loaf by loaf, whether to buy the soft white miracle in the wrapper or to bake your own, and the answer changes with how much time and how much money you have that week. Wonder Bread is cheap enough and effortless, sliced and pale and softer than bread has any right to be. But it goes stale fast. And stale bread is not garbage in your kitchen. It is tomorrow's pudding, next week's crumbs, the base of a dozen dishes designed to make sure nothing you paid for ever gets thrown away. The store bread is a genuine marvel, and you try not to be too charmed by it. Wonder Bread comes sliced, uniform, wrapped in its cheerful polka dot bag, so soft you can compress a slice to almost nothing between two fingers and watch it slowly rise back. It builds strong bodies 8 ways, the advertisements insist, which is 8 more ways than you asked about, and it makes the children happy in a way your denser homemade loaf somehow never does. At about 15 cents a loaf, it is also almost too cheap to bother baking against, and this is the quiet calculation slowly killing the home loaf across the whole country. Baking your own takes flour and yeast and a warm afternoon and the labour of the kneading, and at the end you have produced something that costs about the same as the wrapped loaf you could have simply lifted off a shelf. The math no longer favours your hands, it favours the factory. So you bake when time is loose and money is tight, and you buy when time is tight and a nickel of difference does not decide the week. The homemade loaf is better, denser, more honest, and it fills the house with a smell no wrapper can sell. But it is a luxury of time now, not a thrift, and you feel the shift even if you could not name it, the slow inversion, where making a thing yourself has softly become the expensive option. But here is where your kitchen refuses to change, where the old thrift holds firm no matter which bread you bought. Bread does not get thrown away, ever. A stale loaf is not the end of a loaf, it is the beginning of its second career, and you have a whole repertoire of dishes that exist for no other reason than to resurrect bread. The family did not finish while it was soft. Nothing you paid 15 cents for escapes into the garbage. The garbage in your kitchen is nearly empty. The transformations are a culinary magic act. Stale bread becomes bread pudding, sweetened and baked into a dessert that tastes deliberate. It becomes French toast, the staleness actually improving it, soaking up the egg where fresh bread would go to mush. It becomes crumbs, dried, crushed, and saved in a jar to top the casserole and bind the meatloaf and stretch the ground beef. It becomes the thickening in a soup, the stuffing in a bird, the crouton in a salad. One loaf, refusing to die, feeding you in a dozen disguises. Grandma Vasco taught you the pudding, of course, arriving one afternoon to find you eyeing a hardened half loaf with defeat, and she tied on the apron and showed you how a thing gone hard becomes a thing gone sweet with nothing but eggs and milk and a little sugar. She did not phrase it as a lesson in economy. She phrased it as a lesson in respect. For the loaf, for the money, for the work that bought it. You understood both. So the bread question is really 2 questions, and you answer them separately. Which loaf to buy, decided by time and pennies, factory, or hands. And what to do with the loaf when it hardens, which is never in doubt, because the answer is always the same, always another dish. Always one more meal squeezed from something a wealthier kitchen would have binned. The loaf goes stale on the counter. You are already planning its second life. Nothing here dies unused. You buy eggs by the dozen and watch their price move more than almost anything else in the basket, up to 74 cents one year, down again the next, always shifting under you. Eggs are breakfast, but they are also the binding of half of what you cook, the thing a cake will not rise without, the emergency dinner when the meat runs out. So you never buy just enough. You buy against the week ahead, against the baking you have planned, against the possibility that Thursday goes wrong and eggs become supper. The egg is the most steadily versatile thing you carry home, a beige machine that does 100 jobs. It is breakfast fried, scrambled, and boiled. It is the binding that holds the meatloaf together, and the crumb that coats the cutlet. It is the leavening that lifts the cake and the richness that thickens the custard. It is, on a bad night, dinner itself, an omelette folded around whatever is left, a whole meal conjured from 3 eggs and an onion when the meat money has run dry. No other item in the basket wears so many hats, which is exactly why the price movement matters so much, and why you track it the way a farmer tracks the sky. Eggs swing, 74 cents a dozen in a bad year, back toward half that in a good one, and the swing lands hard because you use so many for so many things. A jump in the egg price does not just raise breakfast. It raises the cake, the meatloaf, the emergency omelette, the web of dishes that quietly depend on the egg. So you buy ahead, always slightly more than the moment requires, because eggs keep well enough and a stocked egg is insurance against a hungry surprise. You think about the baking coming up, the birthday cake on Saturday that will eat 3, the custard you promised. You keep enough on hand that a failed dinner is never a crisis, only a pivot, the meat plan abandoned for eggs and toast, and nobody the worse for it. The testing is its own ritual, because a bad egg discovered in the bowl can ruin a whole batch of batter. You hold a doubtful one up to the light, or lower it gently into a bowl of water to see if it sinks trustworthy or floats suspicious. The old tests handed down from women who could not afford to waste a single one. The careful ones crack each egg into a separate cup first, never straight into the mixing bowl, because one rotten egg in the batter is 12 good ones wasted. The children have opinions about eggs that the budget cannot always accommodate. Donald wants them scrambled soft, his sister wants them fried or not at all, and you navigate these preferences against the reality that eggs are frequently the cheapest protein in the house. You do not force it. You disguise it. Eggs slip into the meatloaf and the fried rice and the pudding where no child thinks to object, doing their quiet, nutritional work in dishes that do not announce them. There is a seasonal rhythm to it, too, older than the price swings. The ancient fact that hens lay more in spring and less in the cold. The price partly follows the hens, cheaper when they are generous, dearer when they are sulking. The most modern supermarket in the world still answers, in the egg aisle, to a chicken's opinion of the weather. So you carry home more eggs than today strictly needs, and you are right to, because the egg is the hinge the flexible week swings on. Breakfast, binding, leavening, emergency, all of it resting in a cardboard carton you set carefully on top of the bag so nothing crushes it. You hold one up to the window. It glows faintly. It will be a cake, or it will be a Thursday saved. Either way, it earns its place. You stock the pantry with the things that do not spoil, because a shelf of flour and sugar and canned goods is the closest thing you have to a savings account you can eat. Sugar comes in a 5-pound sack for pennies over 40 cents. Flour comes in bags you will empty into a bin. Cans of soup and vegetables line up like reserves waiting to be cooled. You buy these when they are cheap and hold them against the weeks when they are not, quietly building a buffer between your family and the next bad grocery week. The staples are the boring, patient and reliable heroes of the operation, and you treat them with the respect boring heroes deserve. They do not spoil in a week. They do not answer to the season or the hens or the frost in some distant coffee country. A sack of sugar bought in June is exactly as good in December, which makes it a rare thing in your kitchen, a grocery you can buy on your own schedule instead of the foods, stockpiling when the price is kind and coasting when it climbs. So you buy the staples like a squirrel with a budget, deeper than the moment demands. When sugar is cheap, you buy 2 sacks, not 1. When the flour is on special, you take the big bag and heft it home and empty it into the tin bin with the tight lid that keeps the weevils out, because a mealy bug in the flour is a tragedy and a sealed bin is cheap insurance. The pantry fills, shelf by shelf, into a quiet fortress you can eat your way through when the world outside turns expensive. The cans are the soldiers of the reserve, and you keep a standing army of them. Campbell's soup, stacked and waiting. Canned peas and corn and green beans for the winter months when nothing fresh is worth buying. Canned peaches for a cheap dessert. Canned salmon for a Friday. Canned tomatoes that become the base of half of everything. Each can is a guaranteed meal that will keep for a year. A promise sealed in tin that whatever else goes wrong, dinner is possible. You survey the pantry the way some women survey jewellery, and the satisfaction is worth more for being earned. You open the door, look over the stacked cans, the full bins, and the sealed jars, and feel the deep quiet of a woman who lived through years when the shelves were bare and never intends to see them bare again. A full pantry is not thrift. It is safety, made of flour and tin, a wall against a hunger you remember too well. There is a real strategy to it, a slow, patient game. The fresh food never lets you play. The meat and the milk and the produce force your hand, bought and eaten on their schedule, no room to maneuver. But the staples let you be clever, let you buy low and hold, let you watch the prices and pounce, let you turn a good sale in June into cheap baking in December. The pantry is the one corner of the grocery ledger where you get to play offence. And it changes how a bad week feels, which is the entire point. When the meat budget collapses or the coffee doubles or an unexpected bill eats the envelope, the pantry is what stands between you and disaster. There is flour, so there is bread. There are cans, so there is dinner. The family may eat plainer for a few days, but they eat. And they eat from a reserve you built silently months ago against exactly this. A past version of you feeding the present one. So you slide the new sack of sugar onto the shelf beside the others and feel the specific comfort of a stocked pantry, the comfort of a stocked shelf, an uncertain future answered in tin, flour, and forethought. The shelves are full. The bad week will find you ready. You reach for the house brand more often than the advertised one, and you do it on purpose, because the difference in price adds up faster than the difference in taste. A&P has built an empire on this exact choice, lining its shelves with Ann Page cans and Jane Parker cakes priced a few cents under the names from the magazines. Buying the store brand is a small admission and a smart move at the same time. You are not fooled by the pretty label on the national jar. You are just doing the math again at the shelf. Ann Page is a woman who does not exist, and you buy her jam anyway. She is A&P's invention. A friendly name stamped on the store's own cans of ketchup and beans and preserves, priced a reliable few cents below the national brand sitting right beside her. There is no Ann Page. There is a factory and a marketing department and a store the size of a country, and together they have produced a jar of jam that costs less and tastes, to be honest, about the same. You reach past the famous name and take Ann's, and Ann, being imaginary, never takes it personally. Jane Parker handles the baked goods, another cheerful phantom, her name on the bread and the cakes and the pies that A&P bakes for itself. 8 o'clock does the coffee. The whole store is populated with these invented friends, these house brand personalities, each one undercutting the advertised competitor by a margin small enough to seem trivial and large enough, across a year of groceries, to matter enormously. You have made friends with the phantoms because the phantoms save you money. The strange thing, the thing later shoppers will find hard to believe, is that the house brand carries no shame here. A&P has sold under its own name for the better part of a century, and its name means value, comfort, and trust. A store too big to sell you junk. Buying Ann Page is not settling. It is being sensible, and being sensible is respected, and the woman who fills her cart with store brands is not pitied, but softly admired as one who knows what she is doing. You do the taste tests in your own kitchen, quietly. A scientist of the grocery budget. The store brand peas against the name brand peas, and honestly, peas are peas. The store ketchup against the famous one, and there, maybe, you can taste a difference, so ketchup stays name brand because your husband would notice. You learn, item by item, where the difference is real and where it is only the label, and you spend the extra pennies only where a tongue could actually tell, because that is the real skill, knowing which corners are safe to cut. Some things, the store brand is identical and only a fool pays more for the name. Some things, the name genuinely earns its price, and cutting the corner would show at the table. The art is telling them apart, and you have built a whole private map of it in your head, a grocery list color-coded by where quality matters and where it is pure marketing, invisible to everyone but you. Mr. Petrucci at the corner store, who cannot match A&P's house brand prices, has made his peace with it and plays a different game. He cannot beat the giant on the price of a can of beans, so he beats it on the things the giant cannot offer: the credit book, the held bag, the soup bone, the knowing your children's names. You buy your staples cheap from the phantom brands at the big store, and you buy your loyalty and your emergencies from the real man at the one, and both are correct. So you fill the cart with Ann Page and Jane Parker, the friendly phantoms, saving a few cents a can that will become real dollars by December. The famous names sit unbought on the shelf, wondering where their customer went. She went to Ann's. Ann is cheaper, and Ann has never once let her down. You come to the long glass-lidded cases at the edge of the store, breathing their cold fog, and you understand that something in the way you cook is about to change. The frozen aisle is newer than your marriage. It hums with compressors and holds vegetables picked months ago and meals already assembled waiting behind frosted glass. Everything in here promises to give you back time you did not know you were allowed to want. You lean over the cold and look at the future, and the future costs a little more than the past did. The cold rolls off the cases when you slide the lid, a breath of winter in the middle of the store. This whole frozen world is genuinely new, made possible by a man named Clarence Birdseye who watched fishermen in the Arctic pull fish from the water into air so cold it froze them solid in an instant, still tasting fresh months later. He turned that trick into an industry, and now it lives here, humming, at the end of your grocery store. Inside the fog sit the frozen vegetables, and they are steadily revolutionary in a way you feel before you can explain. Peas in the dead of winter, green and sweet, picked and frozen at the peak of summer and waiting for you in February when nothing fresh is worth buying. You have spent every winter of your life eating from cans when the garden slept. Now there are peas that taste like June in the middle of January, and the strangeness of that has not worn off yet. Beside the vegetables sit the assembled things, the pot pies, the fish sticks, and the meals in trays, and here the frozen aisle stops being a convenience and starts being a temptation. These are not ingredients. These are dinners finished, frozen, and waiting, needing nothing from you but an oven and 25 minutes. The whole 4-hour drama of the cheap cut and the low pot and the coaxing compressed into a frozen brick you drop in the oven and forget. Dinner reduced to a hostage you thaw into cooperation. It is astonishing. It is also, per meal, more than you would spend cooking it yourself. And that is the exact math the frozen aisle wants you not to do. You could make the pot pie cheaper. You know you could. You could buy the flour and the chicken and the peas and assemble it with your own hands for a fraction of what the frozen one costs. What you would be buying, in the frozen version, is not the food. It is the afternoon. It is the not standing at the stove, the not needing the crust, the hour of your life the tray hands back to you for a price. Miss Chalmers, the young newlywed, has no such hesitation, and you watch her load frozen dinners into her cart with the easy conscience of a woman who never learned to cook the hard way. To her, the frozen aisle is not a temptation to resist, but simply how food works. Dinners bought finished, evenings kept free. You feel, watching her, a complicated mix of disapproval and envy, because she is spending money you would save and keeping time you would spend, and you are genuinely not sure which of you is the fool. The cold fog settles back as you lower the lid, and you stand there a moment in the hum of the compressors, feeling the future press gently against your careful old economy. Everything in these cases points one direction, toward less cooking and more buying, toward the afternoon reclaimed and the ledger quietly loosened. You can feel which way the country is about to tip. You are just not sure you are ready to tip with it. You take the frozen peas because they are honest, a bargain in February. You leave the pot pie this time because the pot pie is a decision about your whole life and you are not making it in an aisle. The cases hum behind you as you go. They can wait. They are good at it. You pick up a Swanson TV dinner and hold it, a whole frozen meal in a segmented tray, turkey and dressing and peas and sweet potatoes, 98 cents and ready in 25 minutes with nothing to wash but a fork. You do the arithmetic you always do. You could cook the same dinner cheaper from scratch, and you know exactly how, but the tray is not selling you food. It is selling you an evening off, and you stand there in the cold aisle deciding how much an evening off is worth. The tray itself is a small marvel of aluminum, divided into neat compartments so nothing touches, the turkey in its bay, the dressing in its bay, the peas and the whipped sweet potato each in their own, a whole Thanksgiving shrunk and frozen and boxed. It came, the story goes, from a disaster, from Swanson getting stuck with 260 tons of turkey nobody bought after the holiday, riding the rails in refrigerated cars with nowhere to go. A salesman named Jerry Thomas looked at the airline trays and had an idea, and the disaster became a product. They expected to sell 5,000. They sold 10 million the first year. And standing here holding one, you understand exactly why. Because the box is not really offering you turkey. Anyone can offer turkey. The box is offering you the one thing your entire life is short of, which is an evening when dinner simply happens without you making it happen. And it turns out an enormous number of tired women will pay 98 cents for that without a second thought. You do the honest math, because you always do the honest math. 98 cents for one dinner for one person. You could feed the family a stretched roast for not much more than that. Per mouth per meal, the tray is expensive, a luxury dressed as a convenience, and the careful woman in you wants to set it back in the fog and walk away and cook like you always cook. That woman is usually right. She is right about this too, on the numbers. But the numbers are not the ledger, and you know that too. There is a cost the numbers never show, the cost of the afternoon at the stove, the 4 hours with the low pot, the standing and the coaxing, and the never quite being off duty. The tray erases all of that for 98 cents. On a normal week you cannot justify it. On a week when you are sick, or the baby is teething, or you simply cannot face the pot one more night, the 98 cents starts to look less like extravagance and more like mercy. Betty Cronin is the reason it works at all, though her name is on nothing. She was the Swanson scientist who solved the real problem, how to make the turkey and the dressing and the vegetables all cook to a safe done temperature in the same oven in the same 25 minutes, so the thing that comes out is hot all the way through and nobody gets sick. A woman engineered the convenience that other women would buy. You do not know her name. You benefit from her work anyway. The children, of course, are lobbying hard, because to them the TV dinner is not a budget question but a wonder. A meal in a tray you eat off your lap in front of the television like something from the future. They do not care that it costs more than a roast. They care that it is theirs, individual, sectioned and exciting, aluminum event. Their enthusiasm is its own kind of pressure. So you stand there, the frozen tray cold in your hands, doing a sum that has no clean answer, weighing 98 cents against an afternoon of your life. Most weeks you put it back, some weeks you do not. This week you hold it a long moment, then you decide. Only you will ever know how close it was. You build a casserole, which is really a machine for turning almost nothing into dinner for a family. The engine of it is a single can of Campbell's condensed cream of mushroom soup, grey and salty, poured over noodles or potatoes or whatever protein you can afford to stretch. You are not following a recipe so much as running an economic strategy that happens to be edible. One can, some leftovers, a handful of crushed crackers on top, and a hot oven turn scraps into a dish you can serve without apology. The casserole is thrift you can put on a plate. The can of soup is the secret the whole dish is built around, and it is barely food on its own. Cream of mushroom, condensed, grey, thick, and aggressively salty, tasting of very little until asked to bind a dozen better things together. You would not eat it as soup. Nobody eats it as soup. It exists, in your kitchen and in a million kitchens, purely as glue, the cheap grey mortar that holds a casserole together and makes leftovers pretend they were always meant to be a dish. And around that can you assemble whatever the week has left you. The last of the chicken, shredded thin to go further, a handful of noodles or a layer of sliced potato, a can of peas, because peas are cheap and green things reassure a family, yesterday's vegetables that would otherwise have died in the icebox. None of it, alone, is a dinner. All of it, bound in grey soup and baked under a crust of crushed crackers, becomes one, and the becoming is the trick. The genius of the casserole is that it hides its own thrift, which is why you love it and rely on it. A plate of obvious leftovers looks like exactly what it is, a family eating scraps. But those same scraps, layered in a dish, bound in soup, browned on top and brought to the table in the baking dish, look deliberate. They look like a recipe. They look like a woman who planned this, and no one at the table suspects that dinner is really Tuesday's chicken and a can of glue in a clever disguise. The crushed crackers on top are the finishing touch, the small flourish that turns economy into presentation. A handful of crackers, or the stale breadcrumbs you saved in the jar, scattered over the top and baked until golden, and suddenly the casserole has a crust, a texture, a look of intention. It is a nice hat on a plain coat, a cheap trick that changes the impression, and you deploy it every time. Mrs. Ferraro, your fence neighbour, considers the casserole beneath her and says so, which is exactly the kind of thing Mrs. Ferraro says. She serves her leftovers as leftovers, honest and unbound, or throws them out entirely and buys something fresh. And she looks down her nose at the grey soup and the crushed crackers as the food of women who cannot afford better. She is not wrong that you cannot always afford better. She is wrong that the casserole is a defeat. It is a victory disguised as a defeat, which is the best kind. Because the truth is the casserole feeds your family well, on almost nothing, night after night, and that is not something to apologize for. The children are full. The protein stretched 3 ways further than it had any right to. The vegetables that would have spoiled instead got eaten. A whole nourishing dinner assembled from ends and scraps and one grey can, served hot and browned and whole, and the envelope barely felt it happen. That is not lesser cooking. That is the hardest cooking there is. So you pull the casserole from the oven, crust golden, edges bubbling, the entire cheap, clever thing steaming in its dish, and you carry it to the table like the small triumph it is. Nobody knows what it cost, which is to say, nobody knows how little. You serve it out. It is dinner. Not legally a recipe, but dinner, and everyone is fed. You are hosting the Ladies' Club this month, which means you have to produce something impressive out of a budget that does not allow for impressive, so you turn to gelatin. You suspend shrimp and olives and celery and cottage cheese inside a bright, wobbling mould, because a jello salad looks like effort and modernity and costs almost nothing to assemble. It is a savoury dessert, a dish shaped like a crown, a thing your guests will admire and quietly fear. You unmould it onto a plate and pray it holds its shape, because presentation is doing the work your grocery money could not. The gelatin salad is one of the strangest things your era has decided is elegant, and you have stopped questioning it and started weaponizing it. A packet of flavored gelatin costs almost nothing. What you suspend inside it can be whatever is cheap and colorful, and once it sets into a bright, trembling and jeweled dome, it reads, somehow, as sophistication, as a hostess who tried, as a table worth photographing. The whole illusion runs on the simple fact that things trapped in gelatin look expensive and are not. So you go to work like a jeweler setting stones, except the stones are groceries. A few shrimp, positioned so they show through the mold, because shrimp signals money whether or not you bought much. Sliced olives for their green rings, celery for crunch and for volume, a swirl of cottage cheese to make it substantial. All of it lowered carefully into the setting gelatin at the right moment. Not too soon or it sinks, not too late or it floats, timed with the precision of hard experience, because you have ruined a mold before and do not intend to again. The mold itself is the gamble, and the unmolding is the moment of truth. You have chilled it overnight in the icebox, and now, an hour before the ladies arrive, you must coax it out of its fluted tin and onto the good plate in one piece, and this is where dreams die. Too warm and it slumps into a puddle of coloured disappointment. Too cold and it clings to the tin and tears. You dip the mould briefly in warm water, invert it, hold your breath, and give it the authoritative shake that either produces a perfect trembling crown or a catastrophe. Mrs. Kowalski, who runs the ladies' club with the iron warmth of a woman who has judged 100 moulds, will notice everything. She will notice if it slumped, if the shrimp sank, if the gelatin wept a little pool onto the plate. She will say nothing directly, because that is not how it is done, but her eyebrow will say it, and the table will read the eyebrow. So the mould must be perfect, must stand tall and clear and jewelled, because you are not really serving a salad. You are submitting an entry. And the marvellous absurdity of it is that a perfect gelatin mould costs almost nothing and buys almost everything. For the price of a gelatin packet and a handful of cheap suspended oddments, you produce a centrepiece so architectural it could rent itself out as a chandelier, a woman on top of her home and her table. The dome trembles with implied effort and hidden thrift. Nobody at the table does the math. They just admire the crown and reach, a little nervously, for a slice. The salad wobbles on its plate, catching the light, shrimp glowing faintly pink through the amber gelatin like a specimen in a museum case. It is, objectively, a bizarre thing to eat. It is also, this afternoon, your armour, the difference between passing and failing an inspection nobody officially admits is happening. You set it in the centre of the table and step back and judge it with your own hard eye. It holds. It stands. It shines. The ladies arrive. Mrs. Kowalski's eyebrow surveys the mould and, slowly, approves. You have passed, on a gelatin packet and nerve. You serve the first trembling slice. It holds its shape on the plate. You breathe. You make a cake from a box, and the box has been carefully designed to let you feel like you did more than open a box. The mix was too easy at first, and nobody bought it, until the companies figured out that a woman wants to crack a fresh egg into the bowl and stir, wants some small proof that her hands were involved. So now the instructions ask for the egg you were always going to add anyway. You measure, you stir, you bake, and you serve it as yours. In a sense, it is. The boxed mix is a genuine convenience and a genuine insult, both at once, and you hold both feelings while you open it. Everything is already in there. The flour, the sugar, the leavening, measured, blended, and boxed by a factory. So that baking a cake requires nothing of you but water and heat. It is fast. It is reliable. It never fails the way a scratch cake can fail on a bad oven day. And it implies that a woman's baking, the thing your mother and her mother did with their hands, was a problem that needed solving. But here is the strange and revealing history the box does not print on its side. The very first cake mixes wanted to do everything, needed nothing but water, and women would not buy them. They sat on the shelves. The mixes were too complete, too effortless, and something in the woman opening the box felt cheated, felt that a cake made from just water was not really hers, not really baking, not something she could set in front of her family and accept praise for with a clear conscience. So the companies did something clever and a little cynical. They took the powdered egg back out of the mix and told the woman to add a fresh one herself. That was the fix. One real egg cracked and stirred in by her own hand, and suddenly the cake felt made, felt earned, felt like hers enough to serve with pride. Sales climbed. A single egg had solved a problem that was never about the cake, and always about the woman, about her need to have genuinely done something. And knowing all that, you crack the egg anyway, and you feel the satisfaction anyway, and you do not entirely mind being managed. Because the truth is, you like the egg. You like the cracking and the stirring, the moment of real hands in real batter, the proof of participation. The company engineered the feeling on purpose, yes, but the feeling is still real and the cake is still good, and your daughter does not care about the psychology of General Mills when she gets a slice. Betty Crocker presides over all of it, and Betty Crocker does not exist, which by now barely surprises you. She is a name and a face invented decades ago, a friendly authority stamped on the box and signed to the recipes, a woman assembled by a company the way a mascot is, built to be trusted and to never once age or burn a cake. You take baking advice from a phantom, the way you take jam from Anne Page, and the phantom is reassuring precisely because she is perfect and patient and never once burned a cake. So you stir the batter, the one real egg doing its honest work among the factory powder, and you pour it into the pan and slide it into the oven you do not fully trust, and the kitchen fills with the smell of a cake becoming a cake. It is not your grandmother's baking. It is something new, faster and surer and a little hollow. And it is also, tonight, a warm cake for your family made partly by your own hands. Both things are true. The cake rises. It always rises now, reliably, which your grandmothers never quite did. You frost it and set it out and accept the praise, and the egg makes the accepting feel honest. You cracked it yourself. That part at least was really you. You keep buying Spam, years after the war that made you buy it ended, because thrift is a habit that does not switch off just because the abundance arrived. The blue and yellow can sit in the pantry as insurance, the meat that never spoils, sliding out with a wet suck and a wobble when you need a cheap protein in a hurry. Your family may groan at it. You keep it anyway. It fed you through the lean years, and some part of you does not fully believe the lean years are gone for good. The can is a small monument to a fear you cannot quite put down. Spam does not spoil. That is the point of it, the reason it exists. A pork product sealed in tin that will still be edible long after the fresh meat has turned and the milk has soured and the produce has gone to slime. It sits in the back of the pantry like a promise, or a threat, the meat that will be there no matter what. And to a woman who remembers ration books, a meat that cannot spoil is not a joke. It is peace of mind you can slice. Because you do remember, and the remembering is why the can stays. There were years not long ago when Spam was not a punchline but a lifeline, when the fresh meat was rationed or simply gone and the blue can was dinner, and you were grateful for it, genuinely grateful, in a way the children who groan at it now will never understand. They taste a salty pink novelty. You taste a decade you survived. The same slice means two entirely different things at the same table. And so it slides from the can, always with that particular sound, the wet suck and the soft wobble as it releases and lands on the plate holding the exact shape of its container, glazed in a thin, trembling jelly. You fry it until the edges crisp and caramelize, because fried it is honestly good, browned, salty, and satisfying, whatever the family pretends. Spam and eggs, spam and rice, spam in the sandwich in the lunchbox when the budget has run to its bones. It works. It always works. The children perform their disappointment with great theatre, and you let them. Because it is a good sign, really. A child who can afford to groan at Spam is a child who has never been hungry, and that is the thing you were working toward. A family comfortable enough to be picky. Their contempt for the blue can is a luxury you bought them, a proof of how far you have climbed, and you would not trade their groaning for anything, even as you make them eat it anyway. Roy, to his credit, does not groan, because Roy remembers too. He was somewhere worse than the kitchen during the lean years, and Spam followed him there, and he eats it now without complaint and sometimes with a strange, quiet appreciation the children find baffling. The two of you share a look over the fried slices, a look the children cannot read, the look of people who know exactly what this cheap tin meat once meant and are not about to sneer at an old friend. There is a deeper thing under all of it, the thing you do not say out loud. You keep the Spam because keeping the Spam means you will never be caught out. Prosperity feels new and possibly temporary, a nice weather that could turn, and the blue can in the pantry is your hedge against the turning. If it all goes wrong again, if the lean years come back, there is meat that will not spoil waiting on the shelf, and you will not be afraid, because you were ready. You are always, quietly, ready. So the can stays, restocked without discussion, the family groaning, Roy silent, you unbothered by any of it. The abundance may be real, your faith in it is provisional. You slice the spam. It wobbles, it holds, like you, it does not quit. You want a fresh tomato in the middle of winter and you cannot have one, or not a good one, because the produce section still answers to the seasons in a way you spend half the year working around. The winter vegetables are canned or frozen, and the rare fresh tomato that appears in January is pale and mealy and priced like a small luxury. So you cook from cans for months, planning around what the earth is not currently offering. The idea that anything could be available all year has not arrived yet. You eat with the calendar. The produce section in January is an honest and slightly grim place, and you have made your peace with its honesty. There are potatoes, which keep. There are onions and cabbages and hard winter roots, the vegetables that were built to survive the cold in a cellar. And there is not much else that is both fresh and worth buying, because the tender summer things are simply not in season, and no amount of wanting them changes what the fields are doing 4 states south under the same cold sky. The tomato is the one that hurts, the summer flavour you miss most in the dark months. In August, the tomatoes are glorious, heavy and red and cheap, practically falling off the stands, and you eat them until you are sick of them and put up the rest in jars. In January, there is sometimes a tomato, shipped from somewhere warm, and it is a pale disappointment, hard, mealy, and priced like a jewel, tasting of nothing but the memory of a tomato. You buy it rarely, and you regret it usually. So the winter kitchen runs on cans and jars, because the earth is a seasonal and famously unreliable supplier, and this is simply how cooking works for half the year. The tomatoes you canned in August become the sauce in January. The store cans fill the gaps, tinned peas and corn and beans standing in for the fresh ones that will not return until spring. You are not deprived exactly. You are just eating a different, preserved, tinned version of abundance, the summer captured and stored and rationed out across the cold months in metal and glass. You find nothing strange in any of this because the very idea of a winter tomato is faintly obscene. You eat what the season gives. A cabbage dish, done right, makes the humble winter root taste like it was the plan all along. Eating with the calendar is not a limitation but simply the truth of food, the natural order, and the woman who wants strawberries in December wants the sun to rise at night. You half agree with that. You still miss the tomato. The children do not know what they are missing, which is its own mercy. They have never tasted a January strawberry because January strawberries do not exist for you, so they do not crave them, do not feel the absence, and accept that some foods come in summer and some in winter, and that is simply how the year tastes. Their world is seasonal, and they find it complete. And there is something almost good in it, though you would not say so while craving a tomato in February. The seasons make the food an event. The first strawberries of summer taste like a holiday because you waited all year. The first corn, the first ripe tomato, the first tender peas arrive like old friends returning, and the waiting is what makes the arriving sweet. Abundance all year long would be easier. It would also, quietly, be less. So you fill the winter cart with roots and cans and the jars from your own cellar, and you leave the sad, pale January tomato where it sits, unbought, a promise the season cannot keep. Spring will bring the real one. You can wait. You have always waited. The cabbage goes in the cart. It is honest, at least, and it knows what season it is. You spend the end of every summer turning cheap abundance into winter groceries you will not have to buy, because the surest way to lower the cash bill is to fill your own shelves. The late-season kitchen runs hot and wet, jars boiling on the stove, the air stinging with vinegar and steam, your hands busy for days. Tomatoes, beans, pickles, jams, all of it sealed under metal lids and carried down to the cellar in rows. It is exhausting, and it is unpaid, and it is also the reason your family eats in February without the grocer taking another bite of the budget. The timing is the strategy, and the timing is dictated by the harvest. In late summer, the tomatoes come in cheap and heavy, more than anyone could eat fresh, practically given away at the stands, and this glut is precisely the moment to strike. You buy them by the bushel when they cost almost nothing, converting a seasonal low price into months of food through nothing but labour and jars and a very hot kitchen. And the kitchen in canning season is a punishing place, a small factory running at full heat in the worst of the summer warmth. The big pot boils for hours to sterilize the jars, muttering to itself the whole time. The steam fogs the windows and slicks your face and arms. The vinegar for the pickles stings the air sharp enough to make your eyes water. You stand in the heat for whole days, scalding, peeling, packing and sealing, your hands red and your back aching, manufacturing next winter one jar at a time in the sweat of this one. The process is exacting and unforgiving, and a mistake is not just wasted food but a small danger. The jars must be truly sterile, the seals truly tight, because a jar that fails to seal does not just spoil, it can turn poisonous in the dark of the cellar, and everyone knows a story of a family that learned this the hard way. So you are meticulous, pressing each lid to check the seal, listening for the little pop that means it took, discarding any that did not. Grandma Vasco is in her absolute element here, and canning season is when she is most fully herself. She arrives for the duration, sleeves shoved up, directing the operation like a general who has won this campaign 40 times, showing you how to test the seal and how long to boil and which tomatoes to reject. This is her deepest knowledge, the skill of the old country and the lean years, the turning of summer into winter, and she passes it to you jar by jar with a seriousness she brings to almost nothing else. You are learning a form of security, and she knows it. And then, weeks later, the reward, the rows of full jars carried down to the cool dark cellar and lined up on the shelves like treasure, which is exactly what they are. Red tomatoes, green beans, golden peaches, dark jams, pickles in their brine, a whole summer captured and stored, glinting faintly in the cellar light. You stand at the bottom of the stairs and survey them, dozens of jars, hundreds of meals, and feel a satisfaction deeper than almost anything the store can sell you. You made that. It costs sweat, not dollars, because that is the quiet triumph of the exhausting business. Every jar on that cellar shelf is a grocery you will not have to buy, a meal already paid for in August labor instead of February cash, a permanent subtraction from the winter allowance. When the cold comes and the prices climb and the fresh food vanishes, you will simply go down to the cellar and bring up summer, and the grocer will never know how many meals he did not sell you. So you seal the last jar, wipe your streaming face, and carry the final tray down to join the glinting rows. The kitchen can cool now. Winter is already fed. You climb the stairs, aching and triumphant. You have beaten February and July. You are feeding a husband who expects meat at dinner, real meat, every night, and you are doing it on a budget that does not technically allow for that, which means the whole week is a quiet act of engineering. You rotate the cheap cuts. You stretch a roast into 3 appearances. You bulk out the ground beef with breadcrumbs and hope nobody counts. The expectation is fixed and the money is fixed and only your ingenuity is variable, so it is your ingenuity that gets stretched thinnest of all, night after night, plate after plate. The expectation itself is never spoken and never negotiable, which is what makes it heavy. A proper dinner has meat at the center of it. This is simply understood, in your house and up and down the street, a rule nobody wrote down because nobody thought it needed writing. A man works, a man rests, and a man is served meat. A meatless dinner reads as a household in trouble, and so the meat must appear every night, 7 nights, on an amount of money a colder arithmetic would say covers 4. So you become an illusionist, and the illusion is abundance. The trick is never to let the meat look like what it is, which is careful, rationed, and stretched. Monday's roast is a proud whole thing, meat as meat, the honest centerpiece. But Monday's roast is also Tuesday and Wednesday in disguise, reappearing as hash, as sandwiches, as the meat folded into a casserole where its diminished quantity hides among the noodles and the grey soup. One purchase, worn like a costume, playing 3 different dinners. Ground beef is your most versatile soldier, precisely because it hides its own stretching so well. A pound of it, on its own, is one modest meal, but mixed with breadcrumbs and an egg and an onion it becomes a meatloaf that feeds everyone. Beef the way a rumour is technically true. The bread silently doing the work you did not pay for. It becomes the thin layer in the casserole, the crumble in the sauce over a mountain of cheap noodles. Always tasted, rarely present in the honest quantity a butcher would call a serving. Roy eats it all without suspicion, and his lack of suspicion is the measure of your success. He sits down to meatloaf and sees meatloaf, not the breadcrumbs stretching it. He eats the Wednesday casserole and does not recognize Monday's roast wearing a disguise. He believes, because you have arranged for him to believe, that this household simply has meat every night, easily, the way a comfortable household should. He has no idea he is eating 4 meats worth of dinner across 7 nights. That ignorance is the entire art. The children are less discreet and more dangerous, because children announce things. Donald will say, loudly, that this tastes like the roast from Sunday, threatening to expose the operation at the table, and you will smoothly agree that yes, isn't it nice, without confirming that it is in fact the very same roast on its 3rd night of active duty. You have learned to redirect a child mid-sentence, to praise the meal, to move the conversation, protecting the illusion from the one person honest enough to shatter it. And underneath the performance runs a quiet resentment you rarely let yourself feel, because feeling it does not help. The rule is unfair. The money does not match the expectation, and the gap is filled entirely by your labour and your cleverness, uncounted and unthanked. So a man can enjoy the comfortable belief that meat simply appears nightly. He is not cruel. He simply does not see it, and the not seeing is the reward you are working for. So you serve the 3rd night of the roast, disguised and delicious, and you watch your family eat it as if it were nothing, as if meat every night were the most natural thing in the world. That naturalness is your masterpiece. Nobody applauds a magician whose trick they never noticed. Roy asks for seconds. The platter, somehow, has exactly 1 more serving. Funny how that keeps happening. You pack the children's lunches every school morning out of the margins of the grocery budget. The leftovers and the ends and the cheapest fillings you can make look like a treat. A sandwich on the soft white bread, an apple if apples are cheap that week, something wrapped in waxed paper that will survive until noon in a lunchbox. It has to be filling, it has to be cheap, and it cannot look poor, because children compare their lunches and yours are not going to be the ones that get pitted. So you build small, dignified meals out of very little before the sun is fully up. The lunchbox is a public document, and this is the pressure that shapes everything you pack into it. What a child unwraps at the school table is seen by every other child at that table, compared, ranked, silently judged in the merciless economy of the lunchroom. A sad lunch marks a child. A poor lunch follows them around. So the lunch you pack is not only nutrition, it is reputation. A daily statement about your family delivered by your child to a jury of 8-year-olds, and you pack it knowing they are watching. So you perform quiet miracles with waxed paper and cleverness. The sandwich is often the cheapest filling made to look like a choice, not a limit. A little of yesterday's meat if there was any, or egg salad because eggs are cheap, or peanut butter which is thrifty and beloved and gives nothing away. You cut the crusts sometimes, not because it is efficient, it is the opposite of efficient, but because a crustless sandwich looks cared for, looks deliberate, looks like a mother who had the time, which is exactly the impression you are manufacturing. The extras are where the real artistry lives, the touches that lift a cheap lunch into a proud one. An apple polished on your apron until it shines. A few cookies, homemade because homemade is cheaper than boxed and also reads as love. A note tucked in sometimes, which costs nothing and means everything, and makes the modest box feel like a gift rather than a ration. You are dressing thrift in affection, and the affection is real even when the thrift is the reason. The waxed paper is your one technology, and you fold it with the precision of a woman wrapping a present. There is no plastic wrap yet, no little bags, just the waxed paper and your folding, and you have become very good at the folding, turning a square of translucent paper into a tidy sealed parcel that keeps the bread from going hard by noon. Donald, of course, has requests and opinions and a keen awareness of what the other children carry. He wants what the Bergstrom boy has, whatever that is this week, and he reports on the lunchroom hierarchy with the gravity of a diplomat, informing you which fillings carry status and which invite mockery. You listen, because the information is useful, and you accommodate what you can and cannot accommodate the rest, steering him toward the cheap things that happen to also be the popular things, a alignment you are grateful for. And it happens before dawn, every school day, which is the part that goes most unnoticed. While the house sleeps, you are already at the counter in the early grey light, spreading, cutting, wrapping and folding, assembling these small, proud parcels so they are ready when the children stumble down. Nobody sees this labour. The lunches simply exist, appearing in the boxes as if by magic, another thing that happens because you rose in the dark to make it happen. So you seal the last waxed paper parcel, tuck it into the box beside the shining apple, and close the lid on a lunch that looks like plenty and cost like nothing. The child will carry it to a table of judges and pass, the sandwich holding its dignity all the way to noon. The boxes wait by the door. Your first shift is already done. You are being sold constantly the idea that the correct branded product is how a good wife shows her family she loves them, and the pressure of it follows you down every aisle. The advertisements do not say buy this because it is cheap. They say buy this because a devoted mother would. Serving the wrong gravy, the wrong gelatin, the wrong coffee is quietly framed as a small failure of care. You know it is a sales tactic. You feel the guilt anyway, reaching for the name from the commercial, because they have tied your grocery list to your worth as a wife. The advertisements have learned not to sell the pudding, which is the clever part. They sell the quiet fear that a better wife would have bought it. They talk about you. They show a radiant woman serving a beaming family the correct branded pudding, and the message underneath is that this is what love looks like, this exact jar, and a woman who truly cared would not dream of serving the lesser one. What they are selling is a standard of devotion, and the pudding is merely how you are meant to prove you meet it, and it works on you even though you can see it working, which is the maddening part. You stand in the aisle knowing full well that the store-brand gravy is identical and cheaper, knowing the guilt is manufactured, engineered in some office by men who have never made a gravy in their lives, and you still feel the tug toward the advertised name. Because what if it does matter? What if the family can tell? What if choosing the cheap one is, in some way you cannot quite dismiss, choosing to care a little less? The doubt is the product. They planted it well. The genius of it is how it turns thrift into guilt, inverting your grandmother's whole moral order. To her, stretching $1 was virtue itself, the mark of a capable woman. But the ads have reframed it, so the cheaper choice feels like a corner cut on your family and the pricier one feels like generosity. They have made spending more feel like loving more, possibly the most profitable lie ever told to a housewife. Mrs. Ferraro, your fence neighbour, has swallowed it whole, and watching her is instructive. She buys every advertised name, every premium brand, and she does it with the serene confidence of a woman who believes she is thereby proving something, loving harder, keeping a better home. Her cart is a monument to the commercials. Her grocery bill is enormous, and her family is fed no better than yours, arguably worse, because the money that bought famous labels could have bought more actual food. She confused the advertisement for the love. You try not to, because you have done the honest accounting, the one the advertisements do not want you to do. Love is not in the jar. Love is the 4 hours at the stove with the cheap cut, the pre-dawn lunches, the canning in the summer heat, the 1,000 quiet, unseen, and endlessly uncredited labours that actually hold a family together. The branded pudding is not devotion. It is a purchase, and confusing the two would mean measuring your care in dollars spent, which is precisely the trap, and you refuse the trap, mostly, on your better days. But not every day, because the pressure is relentless and you are only human. Sometimes you buy the name brand, the one from the commercial, not because it is better, but because you are tired, and the guilt is loud, and it is easier, this once, to just buy the reassurance. You forgive yourself. A woman cannot fight every manufactured feeling every single time, so you stand in the aisle, the 2 jars before you, and you make the choice they have loaded with meaning it does not deserve. Most days you take the honest jar and the guilt with it, and carry both to the register. The advertised jar stays on the shelf, still promising to love your family for you. You know better, usually. You read the women's magazines, and the women's magazines have opinions about what is on your table, opinions dressed up as helpful tips and glossy photographs. They show you a perfect molded salad, a perfectly frosted cake, a perfectly set table, all of it achievable, they imply, by any wife who simply tries hard enough with the right products. You cut out the recipes. You measure your own kitchen against the photographs and come up short, because the photographs had a stylist and a budget and you have neither. The magazines are teaching you to want things, and it is working. The photographs are the seduction, and they are lies told in colour. A roast glistening impossibly, a cake taller and smoother than any your oven has produced, a table set with matching everything under flattering light. It looks effortless and attainable, just the right recipe and the right products between you and that gleaming table. What the picture does not mention is the food stylist, the professional kitchen, and the dozen ruined attempts the varnish brushed on the roast to make it shine. You are comparing your Tuesday to a fiction, and the comparison does its slow corrosive work. You look at the glossy moulded salad and then at your own, which trembled and wept a little at the ladies' club, and you feel the gap between them as a personal failing rather than a difference of resources. You did not have the stylist. You did not have the budget. But the magazine has trained you to read the gap as your shortcoming, so a photograph a company spent hundreds of dollars to stage becomes, in your kitchen, a monthly subscription to inadequacy. The recipes themselves are often a Trojan horse, a delivery system for the brands that pay for the pages. The perfect dessert requires, of course, the specific branded gelatin, the specific canned fruit, the specific whipped topping, each named, each conveniently advertised 2 pages later. The magazine is not really teaching you to cook. It is teaching you to shop, wrapping a grocery list in the language of homemaking, and you cut out the recipe and add its named products to your list without noticing you have been recruited. Mrs. Kowalski from the Ladies' Club treats the magazines as scripture, and you have watched her exhaust herself chasing their photographs. She attempts the elaborate multi-layered aspic, the recipes that assume infinite time and money, and arrives at the club flustered, overspent, and defeated, having burned a day and a fortune to approximate a picture. She is chasing a standard that does not exist, that was never meant to exist, that was staged specifically to keep her chasing. You feel for her, even as you decline to join the race. Because you have learned to read the magazines the way you learned to read the grocery circular with a skeptical eye. You take the recipe that is genuinely useful and leave the one that is a branded fantasy. You admire the photograph without believing it, the way you admire a painting as a made thing rather than a mirror. This immunity took years to build and is never quite complete, because the next issue always finds a new angle. And yet you keep reading them, because they are not only poison, and this is the honest complication. There is real pleasure in the glossy pages, real useful ideas among the fantasies, a genuine joy in the colour and the dreaming of a nicer table. You just have to hold the pleasure and the manipulation at once, taking the recipe and refusing the shame, a double vision you practice every month at the kitchen table with the scissors. So you clip the one good recipe from this issue and turn past the impossible photograph without letting it wound you, mostly, and add the honest ingredients to your list and leave the branded fantasy on the page. The magazine wanted to make you feel small. You took a recipe instead. You set the scissors down. The perfect table in the photograph does not exist. Yours, imperfect and real, waits to be set. You get word that company is coming, and suddenly the careful budget you have balanced all week has to produce a table that looks like you never budget at all. An unexpected dinner guest, the husband's boss, the important relative, means stretching money that was already spoken for into something that looks generous. You serve the good cuts you had been saving. You bring out the nice dishes. You perform abundance for one evening on the same allowance that fed you beans on Tuesday, because hospitality is a kind of theatre, and you are, tonight, the entire production. Roy mentions, casually, as though it costs nothing, that his boss is coming to dinner Friday, and in the space of that sentence your whole week reorganizes itself. You say, of course, how nice, and behind your calm face a rapid and slightly panicked accounting begins, because Friday just became the most important meal of the month, and the money for it does not exist. So you find it, the way you always find it, by robbing the rest of the week to fund the one performance. The good roast you would never buy for just the family, bought now, because the boss cannot be served the stretched cheap cut. The nicer vegetables, the real dessert, the bottle of something. And to pay for it, the days around it go lean and quiet, the family eating thin on Wednesday and Thursday so that Friday can shine, a private sacrifice nobody at the fine table will ever suspect. The table itself becomes a stage set, dressed with everything good you own. The wedding china comes down from the high shelf where it lives safe, clean and unused. The cloth napkins that require ironing get ironed. You are building an illusion of a household that dines like this always, when in truth the china has not seen daylight since the last important guest, and the family eats off the everyday plates the rest of the year. The boss, a Mr. Ellery who holds Roy's advancement loosely in his hands, must be made to feel that Roy comes from a home of quiet competence and comfort. This is the real function of the meal, and it has almost nothing to do with food. The dinner is a job interview conducted through a roast, a demonstration that Roy is settled, stable, well-kept, the kind of man a company promotes. And you are the one conducting it, the unnamed force behind the impression, cooking Roy's advancement one course at a time while Mr. Ellery assumes the food simply happened. The children are drilled and warned and briefly transformed into small, polite strangers. Donald, who will announce anything, is coached within an inch of his life not to mention that this is the first roast in a month, not to ask why the good plates are out, not to reveal a single one of the household's careful economies to the important man at the table. You watch him all evening with a mother's dread, knowing that the entire performance rests on an 8-year-old successfully not saying the one true thing he is bursting to say. And it works, because you make it work. And Mr. Ellery leaves full and impressed and faintly envious of Roy's comfortable home. He compliments the roast, which was excellent, because you made sure it was. He does not know it was funded by 3 days of beans he will never hear about. He experienced a warm, abundant evening, exactly as designed, and the design was entirely yours, invisible and uncredited. So you clear the fine plates after they have gone, the performance struck, the stage returning to an ordinary kitchen, and you feel the specific exhaustion of a woman who has just staged a convincing show of a wealth she does not have. The china goes back on the high shelf. The family goes back to the everyday plates. Roy, hopefully, goes a little further at work. You wash the good dishes by hand and put them away for next time. There is always a next time. There is always another important guest. You trade intelligence with the other women on the block, because the deals are scattered and shared knowledge is the only way to catch them all. One neighbour found chicken cheap at the far store. Another warns you coffee is about to jump. A third has a coupon she is not going to use. The gossip over the fence and across the sidewalk is not idle, or not only idle. It is a working network of grocery information, passed woman to woman, and being plugged into it is worth real money off the weekly bill. You give a tip, you get a tip. The network runs on the daily contacts nobody would call a meeting. The chat over the back fence while the laundry hangs. The few minutes on the sidewalk when the walks to the store cross. The pause at the mailbox, the exchange on the church steps, the phone call that starts about one thing and turns, inevitably, to what things cost this week and where. None of it looks like business. All of it is business. A constant low exchange of price intelligence that keeps every woman on the block a little sharper than she could be alone. And the information is genuinely valuable, which is why it flows so freely. Mrs. Kowalski found the ham marked down at the store across town and tells you before it sells out, and you get there in time, and you owe her one. You warn Mrs. Ferraro that coffee is climbing, so she stocks up before the jump, and she remembers it. The tips are currency, traded, hoarded, and repaid, each one a real saving, and a woman plugged into the grapevine eats better than a woman too proud to gossip. The network carries more than prices, of course, because it cannot help itself. Wound in with the news about the marked-down ham is the news about whose husband lost his position, whose account at the grocer has gone unpaid, whose daughter is in trouble, all of it carried by the same women in the same conversations. You take the price tip and the gossip together because they arrive together, a single stream you could not separate if you tried. Mrs. Ferraro, predictably, treats the network mostly as a channel for gossip, and only incidentally for prices, which is exactly backward from how you use it, and the difference tells you something about each of you. She wants to know whose marriage is failing. You want to know where the chicken is cheap. You both get both, because the stream carries both, but where you attend to the useful and endure the salacious, she attends to the salacious and half ignores the useful, and her grocery bill shows it. And underneath the practical function there is a real companionship in it, a thing you would not give up even if the prices stopped mattering. The women on the block are the only people who understand the job, the only ones who know what it takes to feed a family on an envelope, and comparing notes with them is not only strategy but solidarity, a shared acknowledgement of a hard, thankless, and generally unseen labour the men never see. When Mrs. Kowalski tells you where the ham is, she is also telling you she knows exactly what your week is like. You are not alone in it. So you lean on the fence a few minutes longer than the laundry requires, trading the week's intelligence, giving a tip, and taking one. And you go inside, a little richer in the currency that keeps the block fed. The network hums on, woman to woman, invisible and essential. Mrs. Kowalski found lamb cheap on Delancey, marked down and going fast. You file it away, one more small saving passed hand to hand. Tomorrow you will go. You walk in 1 week to find that coffee has doubled, or beef has spiked, or eggs have climbed again, and your allowance has not moved a cent to meet it. This is the week the whole careful system gets tested, because a price you did not choose has just eaten into a budget you cannot expand. So you cut somewhere else. You drop the coffee to instant, swap the beef for something cheaper, serve one more meatless dinner than you wanted to. The market moved against you and nobody asked. You absorb it quietly, the way you absorb most things, and rebalance. And your allowance, meanwhile, is a fixed thing, deaf to all of this. Roy hands you the same amount he handed you last week, because nobody indexed your grocery money to the price of beef. Your allowance is a fixed wall. The prices are a tide with no manners and no schedule, and when the tide comes up, the wall does not grow, so the water goes where it always goes, into your ingenuity, the one part of the arrangement with any give left in it. So you rebalance, fast and quiet, on the spot in the aisle. If the coffee doubled, the coffee drops to the cheaper grind or the hidden jar of instant, and something else gives too. If the beef spiked, this is a chicken week, or a beans and rice week, or a week where the meatloaf has a little more bread and a little less beef than pride prefers. Every jump forces a compensating cut, a small, quiet and surgically precise downgrade absorbed somewhere the family will least notice, the whole budget flexing to keep its fixed total while the prices shove at it. The family, of course, must not feel the jump, because shielding them from it is the point. Roy should not open the paper to a lesser coffee and frown. The children should not notice the meat got thinner this week. The jump is your problem, not theirs, and a large part of your skill is absorbing the shock so completely that it never reaches the table, that the family sails through a hard grocery week in the same comfort as an easy one, unaware that behind the unchanged dinner you performed emergency the time. Mr. Dworak at the meat counter sees these weeks coming and softens them where he can, because a good butcher is also a kind of shock absorber. When the beef spikes, he steers you quietly to the cut that did not rise as much, to the chicken that is having a good week, to the thing that will let you keep meat on the table without breaking the wall. He does not lecture, he just guides one professional to another, both of you managing the same volatile market from opposite sides of the glass, and you are grateful for the guidance and the discretion both. And there is a particular loneliness in these weeks, the loneliness of absorbing a blow nobody else in the house even knows landed. The world shoved the envelope, and you took the entire impact silently and rearranged the week so nothing showed, and no one thanked you because no one knew there was anything to thank you for. You are the shock absorber of the household economy, and a shock absorber does its whole job precisely by not being noticed. So you make the swap, drop the coffee, thin the meat, serve the quiet downgrade nobody will detect, and you keep the wall standing one more week against a tide that will rise again next week and the week after. The budget holds. The family sails on. You absorbed it, again. The coffee doubled this week, quietly, from a frost half a world away. At your table the pot steams the same as always, and no one looks up. You save the bacon grease in a can by the stove, and you do it because throwing away something you paid for is not a thing your kitchen does. The grease becomes tomorrow's frying fat. The bones become stock. The stale bread becomes pudding. The vegetable ends become soup. Every scrap has a second life planned for it before it is even finished with its first, and the whole kitchen operates on a principle of near total reuse. It is not a virtue you talk about. It is just arithmetic wearing an apron, making sure the grocery money buys everything it possibly can. The grease can is the small shrine at the center of this religion, and it sits beside the stove where every kitchen keeps one. An old coffee tin usually, filling slowly with the poured-off fat of every fried thing, the bacon, the sausage, and the drippings from the roast. It looks like garbage to a stranger, and it is treasure to you, a free cooking fat you already paid for once, waiting to fry the eggs and grease the pan and season the beans, doing the work you would otherwise buy butter or lard to do, and the grease can is only the most visible member of a whole cast of savours. There is the bag of crusts destined to become crumbs, the bowl in the icebox where a scrap of this and a spoonful of that accumulate toward a soup nobody planned but everybody will eat, the vegetable water saved for the stock, the bones tucked away for the pot, the last smear in the jam jar rinsed out with hot water into a sweet drink for the children. Nothing that entered the kitchen with a price on it leaves without giving all it had. The scrap is not waste. The scrap is money in another shape, and a woman who bins the money in the scraps is softly leaking her allowance into the trash, and you do not leak. Grandma Vasco taught you most of it, of course, and she taught it as gospel rather than technique. She came up in years when a wasted scrap could be the difference that mattered. And to her, the grease can and the bone pot are not thrift so much as respect for the food, for the animal, for the labour and the money that brought it to the kitchen. She does not save the grease to be clever. She saves it because wasting it would be, to her deep bones, simply wrong. And she has passed that wrongness to you like a faith. The younger women are beginning to let it go, and you notice, and you do not entirely understand it. Miss Chalmers, the newlywed, throws away the bacon grease, pours it down the drain without a thought, buys her cooking fat new each time as though the free fat were nothing. To her it is nothing, a mess to be cleaned rather than a resource to be saved, and watching her do it gives you the same small pain as watching money go down the drain, because that is precisely what you are watching. The old thrift is loosening its grip, one poured off grease can at a time, because the abundance is steadily changing the math, and you can feel it even as you resist it. When food was dear, saving every scrap was survival, unquestioned. But food is getting cheaper, buying new is getting easier, and the labour of saving is starting, for some, to cost more than the scrap is worth. Your kitchen still runs on the old total reuse, but you can see the drift toward a world that throws the grease away, and something in you mourns it a little. So you pour the morning's bacon fat carefully into the tin, adding to the pale accumulated wealth of it, and set it back beside the stove. Act of respect, thrift, and arithmetic performed without a thought, nothing wasted. Every penny of the grocery money working to the very last scrap, the can fills, slow and steady. Tomorrow it will fry the eggs, for free, again. You reach the front of the store and the checkout is still a slow human ceremony, not a beep and a screen. The cashier keys each price into a mechanical register by hand, the total arriving with a heavy ring and the pop of the drawer. A bag boy packs the paper sacks, double bagging the heavy ones, and carries them to your trolley or your car without being asked. The stamps get torn off a roll and counted into your hand by the size of the bill. There are no barcodes, no cards, no machines doing your part. There is you, cash, and a wad of stamps to paste tonight. The register is a heavy machine that does its work out loud, and there is something satisfying in the noise of it. The cashier reads each price off each item and presses it in by hand, the keys stiff, cold, and mechanical, and every entry lands with a clack, and the running total builds audibly, item by item. No glowing screen, just a set of little numbers flipping up in a window. When she finishes, she hauls the lever like a woman starting an outboard motor. The total rings out with a bright mechanical chime, and the drawer springs open with a pop that sounds, every time, faintly like winning something. The cashier herself is a fixture. A woman named Dot, who has rung up your groceries for years and could probably guess your total before she starts. She works fast, her fingers finding the keys without looking, chatting the time about the weather, the neighbourhood, and whether the roast looks good this week, the transaction, and the conversation running side by side. She is not just a scanner in an apron. She is a person you know, a weekly relationship, and the checkout is as much a visit as a purchase. The bag boy is the other half of the ceremony, and he takes his craft seriously. There are exactly 3 acceptable ways to pack a paper sack, and young Ronnie knows all 3, the cans on the bottom, the bread and the eggs riding safe on top, the weight distributed so the bag will not tear and the soft things will not crush, double bagging the heavy loads without being told. And then he carries them out, to your trolley, to the car, if there is one, expecting nothing for it but perhaps a nod, because carrying the lady's groceries is simply part of the job, and the job has manners built into it. The money is real and physical, counted out from the envelope in bills and coins, handed over and made change from in front of you. There is no card to swipe, no invisible transfer. You watch the cash leave your hand, feel the specific small pang of it, take the coins back and count them into your purse. The tangibility keeps you honest in a way a swipe never could, because you feel every dollar go. And then the stamps, the final beat of the ritual. Dot tears them off the big roll by the register, counting them out by the size of your bill, one for every dime, and presses the little green ribbon into your hand along with your change. You fold them into your purse to paste tonight at the table, the day's small reward assembled from the day's spending. The stamps are the store's thank you and your homework both, handed over with the change, the loop of the grocery economy closing right there at the counter. So you take your change and your stamps and your well-packed bags, Say goodbye to Dot by name, nod your thanks to Ronnie, and head for the door with the week's groceries and the evening's pasting in hand. The register rings for the customer behind you. The ceremony begins again. You step out into the afternoon, purse lighter, bags full, stamps waiting. The transaction is done, the human way. You reach Friday again, and Friday is when the whole week's engineering gets a verdict, because the money either stretched or it did not. You add up what you spent against what you were given and see where you landed, over or under, and the answer decides whether next week starts easy or starts behind. Nobody audits you but yourself. Nobody sees the arithmetic, the cheap cuts, the stretched roast, the stamps, the canning, the 1,000 small choices that fed 4 people for 7 days. The bill is paid, the pantry is holding, and the allowance is about to land in your hand again. The reckoning happens quietly, usually at the kitchen table, with the week's receipts and the grocer's settled book and the coins left in the envelope spread out before you, like evidence at a trial only you will ever attend. You tally it honestly, because there is no point tallying it any other way, and you find your number, the amount by which you came in under or over, the single figure that grades the invisible week of labour. $1 under is a private triumph. Even is a job well done. Over is a quiet ache and a note to do better, made only to yourself. And whatever the number, the family never sees it, because the reckoning is yours alone. Roy does not ask how the week came out. He assumes it came out the way it always does, the food having appeared and the family having eaten and the operation having run without him needing to know its arithmetic. The children certainly do not know. The reckoning is a solitary accounting, conducted by the one person who understands the full ledger, graded by the only judge who is ever really watching, which is you. You think, sometimes, about everything that went into the week now closing, and the sheer breadth of it is almost funny. The planning from the circular, the trips on foot with the trolley, the negotiations with Mr. Dworak, the cheap cuts coaxed tender over the low pot, the stamps licked, the coupons hunted, the casseroles built from a grey can, the meat stretched into disguises, the lunches packed before dawn, the guest impressed, and the price jump absorbed. 100 distinct skills, exercised all week, to produce a result so seamless everyone assumed it was nothing. That is the strange final truth of the job. The thing that sits with you at the Friday table. Done badly, it would be extremely visible. A family eating thin, a budget blown, a home in obvious trouble. Done well, it is completely invisible, and you did it well, so it vanished. Your whole week of expertise disappears into an ordinary satisfied family who never once thought about where the food came from. And the disappearing is not the failure of the work. The disappearing is the work succeeding perfectly. Grandma Vasco understood this, and understanding it is part of what she passed you along with the recipes. She never expected the thanks either, fed her own family through worse years than yours with the same invisible competence, and taught you not to wait for anyone to notice. The satisfaction is not in being seen, she would say. The satisfaction is in the doing, in the number that came out right, honest, and clean, in the family fed and holding. You take that from her, along with the grease can and the bone pot, so you gather the receipts and settle the last of it and fold away the envelope, the week closed, the verdict in, the private grade recorded only in your own head. It was a good week. The money stretched, held, and landed on empty right on time. And then it is Friday evening, and Roy counts out the money and folds it once and hands it over. The department reopens. You begin again. So there you have it. You spent the night stretching a folded envelope of cash across 7 days, negotiating cheap cuts with a man in a straw hat, licking a small fortune in green stamps, disguising one roast as 3 dinners, and building an entire dinner party centerpiece out of shrimp trapped inside gelatin. And here is the quiet thing underneath all the arithmetic. The woman who ran that grocery money was doing one of the hardest and least noticed jobs there ever was. She fed a whole family on a fixed number that never quite fit, and she did it so well that nobody at her table ever suspected how close the margin ran. The cheap cut came tender. The stamps became a toaster. The lean weeks arrived invisibly and left the same way, and the family simply ate, comfortable and unaware, which was the entire point. It is easy, from here, to look back at those prices and only see how low they were, but 1/3 of everything the household earned went to food, and every penny of it passed through the careful hands of someone keeping a ledger in her head. The bill was small. The work behind it was not. The green stamps are gone now, and the butcher's glass case and the milkman on the pre-dawn porch. The seasons have vanished from the produce aisle, and the whole slow human ceremony of the checkout has been swept away by the beep of a scanner. Something was gained. Something was quietly lost. Thank you for spending this long, quiet hour here with me. There is nothing left for you to budget tonight, nothing to stretch, nothing to carry home, so let your shoulders drop. Let the numbers fade. Let the folded envelope and the long grocery list and the whole careful week settle somewhere soft and far away. The pantry is full, the family is fed, the week came out right. Sleep well,